Chapter 222. At night, at the Su residence, someone got out of bed and lit an oil lamp. The mattress next to her was empty. Su Zhiheng was sleeping in the study again tonight. He Xining walked to the table, picked up an outer robe and put it on. She looked at the flickering wick of the oil lamp with a complicated expression. She didn't know when it started, but there seemed to be an invisible barrier between her and Su Zhiheng. To be more precise, after the last palace banquet, Su Zhiheng became particularly strange. Later, she met her eldest sister, Marquis Wen Hiyan at Yuhua Temple. Not long after she returned to the residence, He Rufei came to visit her. Rather than calling it a visit, it was better to call it a probe. There were some things that once there were signs of suspicion, it couldn't be dispelled. He Xining could feel that the Su family was hiding a big secret. Perhaps it was related to her eldest sister who had passed away, or perhaps it was also related to the He family. She stood in front of the window. The winter in the capital was extremely cold. On such a cold night, the servants had all returned to their rooms to sleep. He Xining looked at the bare branches outside the window. After thinking for a long time, she finally put on a cloak, picked up an oil lamp, and left the room. Her movements were very light and she walked very carefully. She didn't disturb anyone else. The Su family's night watch was outside the main courtyard and wouldn't come in. The light of the oil lamp was very dim. It could only barely illuminate the path under her feet. He Xining felt her way in the dark until she arrived in front of an abandoned courtyard. This abandoned courtyard was the courtyard where her eldest sister, He Yan, had once lived. Even after He Yan's death, Su Zhiheng still maintained the courtyard's original appearance. The last time He Xining was here, she saw Su Zhiheng frantically rummaging through the drawers. She hadn't been able to see what Su Zhiheng was looking for before she was discovered. This time, there was no one around, so she wanted to take a look. Although no one lived in this courtyard, the snow in the courtyard had been swept clean. She walked to He Yan's room. The room wasn't locked. With a gentle push, the door opened. He Xining walked in. There was a musty smell in the room. It was cold and damp. He Xining was slightly surprised. Didn't they say that Su Zhiheng often missed his elder sister? But if he really missed his elder sister, why didn't he clean the room? Instead, it was covered in dust. It was as if no one had set foot here for a long time, and he couldn't wait to avoid it. He Xining looked around with the lamp in his hand. This was a woman's boudoir. In front of it was a shelf with some inexpensive vases and ornaments. In the middle was a small table covered with a thick layer of dust. The teacups and teapot were even covered with cobwebs. Further inside was a large wooden bed. In comparison, this bed seemed to be cleaner as it was covered with a thin blanket. This room looked cold and empty. It was not as warm and exquisite as a girl's boudoir. As soon as he entered, he felt a chill in his face. Although He Yan had married not long after he came back to live in the He family, the boudoir before marriage was still meticulously decorated. If this was the house where He Yan used to live in the Su family, and this house still retained the original appearance of He Yan when she was alive, then He Xining thought that her elder sister who died early most likely didn't live as well as the rumors said in the He family. If it was because he was blind, then it wasn't appropriate to put too many things in the room to avoid tripping over the master, but the furnishings and utensils here were too shabby and perfunctory. There was also nothing to relieve boredom. A blind man living alone in such a large room. If it was him, he would have been driven crazy long ago. He Xining walked to the front of the table. Last time, she saw Su Zhiheng rummaging through the boxes and cabinets. She didn't know what he was looking for. She pulled out a wooden drawer, and as expected, it was empty. Thinking about it, if there really was something, it would have been taken away by Su Zhiheng long ago. She didn't realize that she had unknowingly placed Su Zhiheng in an opposing position. Towards this gentle and considerate husband, she no longer relied on and trusted him like she did in the past. Instead, it was replaced by vigilance and suspicion. Even the warmth of the past had become hypocrisy in He Xining's eyes. He Xining walked around the room and checked all the wooden drawers and shelves. She didn't find anything useful. She had been out for too long, and it was too cold outside. The wind directly drilled into her knees. She rubbed her numb legs, looked at the relatively clean bed, and sat on the edge of the bed. In the room, only the oil lamp in her hand emitted a faint light. Sitting here, she inexplicably felt a bit strange. When she calmed down, Yixing was a little regretful. Why did she come here all of a sudden? There was no one here. It was said that the souls of the dead would linger in the place where they lived. If his elder sister was here, although they were blood relatives, they weren't very close before. Moreover, if they really saw a ghost at night, it could scare people to death. Yixing couldn't help but grip the bedpost tightly. This was a habit she had developed since childhood. When she was young, she was timid and always slept with her mother. When she grew older, she couldn't sleep with her mother anymore. Yixing had her own courtyard. When she lived alone, she was still very afraid. When she was most afraid, she would lean against the inside of the bed at night, tightly holding the bedpost against the wall, and softly praying for Bodhisattva's protection. It was the same today. However, when her fingers slid down the bedpost, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. Yixing was startled. She stretched out her hand to touch the spot just now, and felt that something was wrong. She climbed up to the head of the bed and raised the oil lamp to look inside. Suddenly, she found that on the bedpost against the wall, there was a slightly protruding piece of wood. The girl was careful. She used her fingers to pull it out, and that piece of wood fell off. From inside, a roll of yellow paper was revealed. It seemed to have something written on it. Her heart was beating fast. She only knew that if this thing was hidden here, it must be very important. Perhaps this was what Su Zhiheng was looking for. She couldn't tell when someone would come here. Yixing exerted her strength and pulled out something that looked like a book from the bedpost that had been deliberately hollowed out. She hurriedly hid the book in her bosom and hurriedly fastened the wood of the bedpost. Only then did she carefully leave while holding the oil lamp. The surroundings were strangely quiet. Yixing secretly returned to her room. Only then did she dare to take out the book from her clothes. She used the weak light of the oil lamp to take a look. Sure enough, it was a book. She looked at a few pages and was stunned. This was a military book? All kinds of military strategies were recorded in it. On the side, there were notes and opinions written by the reader. Looking at the handwriting, it definitely wasn't Su Zhiheng's. No one in the Su family practiced martial arts. Moreover, it was hidden in such a secretive way. It was also in He-Yan's room. No matter how she looked at it, this military book was left behind by her elder sister who died early. But how could He-Yan read a military book? If it was her cousin Hirufei, it would be more likely. However, Hirufei's military book didn't appear in the Su family. Why would they hide it so carefully? Yixing held the military book in her hands. She couldn't understand what was going on. At this time, someone's voice suddenly sounded from outside. Yixing was startled. She quickly blew out the oil lamp and hid the book in the lowest box under the table. She quickly walked to the bed and lay down. Just as she lay down, a maidservant knocked on the door. "Eldest young mistress? Eldest young mistress? What's the matter?" Yixing pretended to be sleepy as she answered. There was silence outside for a while. Then someone said, "A thief entered the courtyard. Eldest young master told us to come and ask eldest young mistress." A thief entered? Yixing was a bit nervous. However, she still pretended to be surprised. She put on her outer clothes and opened the door for the maidservant. She asked in confusion, "How could a thief enter the fu?" "I don't know." That maidservant saw that Yixing was really safe and sound in the room. She seemed relieved and said, "Eldest young master is currently interrogating the thief." "I'll go take a look," Yixing said. She closed the door and followed the maidservant to the main hall. In the main hall, Su Zhiheng was sitting on a chair in the middle. A group of servants stood around him. A person dressed as a servant was kneeling on the ground. He continuously kowtowed to Su Zhiheng. "Eldest young master, please spare my life. Eldest young master, please spare my life. This little one really didn't take anything. I didn't take anything." Su Zhiheng's face was so dark that it was about to drip water. He stared at him and said, "Stop talking nonsense. Hand over the things you stole from young Mistress Bedpost. Otherwise you will die here today." When he said this, his eyes were gloomy and fierce. He was completely different from his previous gentle and amiable appearance. Yixing was startled. When she heard the words bedpost, She became even more nervous. She reluctantly squeezed out a smile and walked to Su Zhiheng's side. "Husband, what happened?" Seeing He Xining, Su Zhiheng's expression relaxed. He pointed at the servant on the ground and said, "This person sneaked into a He's courtyard at night and stole a He's old things from the bedpost. He is extremely hateful." Fu Wang, the servant on the ground, hurriedly explained, "Eldest young master, it really wasn't this little one. When this little one found the bedpost, it was already empty. This little one really didn't take anything from inside." Fu Wang was also complaining incessantly in his heart. Today, he took advantage of the night when there was no one around. It was a good opportunity to sneak into eldest young mistress's room, to find the mysterious person's old things. As a result, he walked around the room and found that there was one place that was different from the others. It was the bedpost in the inner room. He originally thought that there would be some secret hidden inside, but when he opened it, it was empty. He didn't have time to feel regret. He didn't know when the people outside were alerted, but he was caught and brought to Su Zhiheng. "Eldest young master, it really wasn't this little one who did it. If you don't believe me, you can search this little one's body and the place where this little one lives. This little one is innocent." He Xining looked at the servant who kept kowtowing and begging for mercy. He couldn't help but be frightened. It seemed that this servant had become her scapegoat. However, if it was just ordinary property, with Su Zhiheng's temperament, he wouldn't be so harsh. At worst, he would just beat him with a plank and drive him out of the residence. Why did it seem like he was going to fight to the death? Could it be that Su Zhiheng knew what was inside the bedpost? But it was just an ordinary military book. He Xining didn't understand. "I see that your mouth is full of lies and not a single word of truth. Since it's like this, I won't be able to get a reason from you even if you stay here. I'll hand you over to the authorities to be dealt with," Su Zhiheng said coldly. As soon as these words came out, Fu Wang's face changed color. Since ancient times, most of the servants who were handed over to the authorities by their masters would die. Moreover, their deaths were especially torturous. He was just a little greedy for money, but he didn't want to lose his life. Moreover, he was so wronged. It had to be known that he didn't get anything. Since it was like this, of course protecting his own life was the most important thing. Fu Wang pleaded, "I beg eldest young master not to hand this little one over to the authorities. In fact, this little one was entrusted by someone to steal something. This little one will tell eldest young master everything I know. Can eldest young master spare this little one's life?" "Entrusted by someone?" Su Zhiheng looked at him. That's right, that's right." Fu Wang kowtowed loudly. Even if this little one was given 100 guts, this little one still wouldn't dare to steal from the estate. Su Zhiheng stared at Fu Wang, as if trying to discern whether Fu Wang's words were true or false. After a moment, he said to the surrounding people, "All of you can leave. I have something to ask this thief." He Xining glanced at the manservant on the ground. "Husband, you also leave." Su Zhiheng's attitude was very firm. He Xining didn't say anything and left. After the door closed, she looked in the direction of the room. She didn't know when, but her palms were already soaked with sweat. That military book. What exactly was going on? Inside the room, Su Zhiheng opened his mouth and asked, "Speak. Who told you to steal from the Su estate?" It's General He. You dare to lie to me." Su Zhiheng was furious. Fu Wang was so frightened that he immediately knelt down. This little one doesn't dare to lie to eldest young master. This little one's acquaintance said that their master was General He. Su Zhiheng's hands clenched into fists, and he suppressed his emotions as he said, "Why did He Rufei ask you to steal things?" This little one also doesn't know. Fu Wang wiped the sweat from his forehead. They gave this little one a sum of money, and this little one was momentarily blinded by greed. I thought that I was only going to steal a few things and inquire about a person. It wasn't anything outrageous, so I agreed. Inquire about a person? Su Zhiheng's eyes narrowed. What exactly did they want you to do? Fu Wang only hoped that he could get out alive. He didn't care about anything else and simply told him everything he knew. They wanted this little one to find some old things from eldest young mistress's life, as well as people related to eldest young mistress. When this little one entered the estate, eldest young mistress had already passed away. I really couldn't find her, so I just thought that maybe I could steal something. He was also very cunning. He only said that he was caught before he could do anything for the other party, and he didn't mention the matter of Mother Qin at all. Tonight, I snuck into eldest young mistress's room, but before I could find anything, I was discovered. But eldest young master, the things in the bedpost really weren't taken by this little one. When this little one found the bedpost, it was already empty. These words weren't false, but unfortunately, Su Zhiheng was still skeptical of him. I beg eldest young master to spare this little one's life. This little one won't dare to do it again, he pleaded. Eldest young master Su, who had always been soft-hearted and easy to talk to, didn't answer today. Fu Wang gathered his courage and looked up. He saw that under the light of the lantern, the man's face was half bright and half dark. Half of his face looked like an ordinary person, but the other half looked like a malevolent demon. It was so twisted that it made people's hearts turn cold. After an unknown amount of time, just as Fu Wang felt that his little life was about to be lost, the people above spoke. Su Zhiheng said, "Since you said that General he asked you to do something, this eldest young master will spare your life. But," his voice deepened, "the next time they ask you to meet, you need to tell them that you didn't find anything. Also, you can't tell anyone that I found you." Was he going to lie to He Rufei's people? Fu Wang's suspicions flashed through his mind. He quickly lowered his head and said with tears of gratitude, "Many thanks, eldest young master. This little one will definitely do a good job for eldest young master." Su Zhiheng looked at the servant kneeling and kowtowing at his feet, and didn't say anything. He Rufei actually secretly sent people to investigate He Yan's old belongings. What was he trying to do? Was he trying to use this information to threaten him? Yes, a few days ago, there was a big fire in the Xianchang restaurant. Coincidentally or not, it just happened to burn He Rufei's childhood notebook. As soon as the news reached the Su family, Su Zhiheng guessed that He Rufei was behind it. It seemed that He Rufei wasn't as calm about the appearance of his cousin who had the same name as him. The He family had too many secrets that could be used against them. Madam He Rufei He Yuansheng, and He Yuanliang. In comparison, the Su family had too few secrets that could be used against them. Even He Yan's death wasn't done by him. If the truth was revealed, Su Zhiheng could completely escape unscathed. Perhaps it was because of this that He Rufei felt uneasy. That was why he tried every possible means to get hold of He Yan's secret in the Su family. This way, as long as he could prove that he also knew about He Yan and He Rufei swapping identities, the Su family wouldn't be able to escape when the truth came to light one day. He Rufei was afraid. That was why he wanted to drag the Su family down with him at this time. Su Zhiheng's face darkened. Even though he knew about this matter from the beginning, he also understood that the He family and Su family were in the same boat. However, when this matter really happened right under his nose, he still felt displeased. In the past, when he was safe and sound, he naturally hoped that they could live well and enjoy glory together. However, once something happened, He Rufei's actions were truly unethical. Since He Rufei was going overboard, then he didn't need to care about their feelings. Speaking of which, just like how Fu Wang went around He Yan's room but didn't find anything, if something really happened, as long as there was no evidence, Su Zhiheng could still protect himself. At night, He Yan tossed and turned on the bed, unable to sleep. She knew that He Rufei wasn't General Fei Hong, and that his story was full of loopholes. However, everyone had to pay attention to evidence. It was impossible for the truth to come out with just one sentence from her. Furthermore, the truth sounded so inconceivable. For the time being, there were no living witnesses in the Fuyue army. Just Mother Qin alone wasn't enough. If they wanted to get hold of He Rufei's weakness, they had to start with the battle at Huayuan. During the battle at Huayuan, He Rufei and Yudo must have had an unspeakable relationship. He Rufei was very cautious. If they wanted to find evidence that He Rufei had colluded with the enemy and committed treason, perhaps they had to go to the He residence. The He residence. He Yan sat up from the bed and leaned against the head of the bed. She looked at the curtains and her thoughts gradually drifted away. In reality, she wasn't afraid to step into the He residence again. She had enough of being used and treated coldly by that He family. When she returned to the He residence, she wouldn't have any old feelings for them. However, When she thought about meeting Madame He again, she didn't know how to face her. Chapter 223. For the next few days, it was snowing heavily every day in Shuo City, and the streets were much more deserted. In the Sufu, He Xining stood in front of the study and knocked on the door. The person inside said, "Come in." He Xining walked in. The kitchen made some red bean sweet soup. "It's too cold outside." He Xining smiled as she took the small bowl out of the basket and placed it in front of Su Jihing's table. "Husband, drink some to warm up your body. Don't freeze." Su Jihing's gaze fell on the small white porcelain bowl on the table. In the porcelain bowl, the red bean sweet soup emitted a sweet and greasy aroma. The brown soup made him suddenly think of the tonic that the He family had sent a long time ago. It had the same color and the same sweet aroma. That soup was extremely effective. After He Yan drank it, he had a high fever for 3 days and could no longer see. Su Jihing subconsciously raised his head. He Xining was looking at him tenderly. Her appearance was somewhat similar to He Yan's. Su Jihing's heart suddenly jumped, and he subconsciously stood up. His sleeve accidentally brushed against the soup bowl on the table. The sweet soup spilled all over the floor and stained his clothes. "Husband, are you all right?" He Xining jumped in fright. She quickly took out a handkerchief to wipe the soup off Su Jihing's body and called a servant to clean it up. "I'm fine." Seeing that the sweet soup had spilled, Su Jihing was relieved. He took the handkerchief and wiped the water off his body. "This bowl spilled. I'll have someone send another bowl over." He Xining hurriedly said. "No need." Su Jihing held her hand and smiled as he pulled her to sit next to him. "I'm not hungry." The woman's hand was warm and soft. It slightly dispelled the uneasiness that had been plaguing him for the past few days. He Xining sat down next to him. After thinking for a bit, she said to Su Jihing, "I heard from Lu that my mother's health wasn't good. She has been bedridden. I want to go back and see my mother. Husband, do you have some free time these few days? Why don't you come with me to He Clan?" He Xining felt uneasy when he kept the book in her room. If one day Su Jihing ordered people to search the entire mansion on a whim, he would be easily discovered. Moreover, this military book came out of nowhere. She herself didn't understand what was going on. It would be better to go back to the He family and ask second Madame He about it. Her mother knew more about her eldest sister than she did. "You want to go back to the He family?" Su Jihing paused and asked He Xining. He looked at He Xining with a scrutinizing gaze. He Xining's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed his arm and said, "I'll go back and take a look. I'll be back tomorrow." "Husband, can you go back with me? My mother hasn't seen you in a long time." He Xining hadn't suffered much since she was young. When he married her, Su Jihing knew that she was a bit arrogant and willful when she was in He Clan. However, after she entered the Su residence, she had always been well-behaved. This was different from He Yan's temperament. Although He Yan never caused trouble and knew his place, it was impossible for him to act spoiled like He Xining. Su Jihing said, "I'm very busy these few days. I'm afraid I don't have time to accompany you back to the residence. How about this? I'll ask someone to send you back first. After a few days, when I have free time, I'll accompany you." He Xining timely revealed a wronged expression and said, "Okay." Su Jihing smiled and held her hand. His thoughts had already drifted to other places. He naturally couldn't go to He Clan right now. Not to mention He Yuanxing and his brother, who knew what He Rufei was planning right now. He had arranged spies in his residence to try and find something that could be used against him. And He Xining as well. Su Jihing thought that although He Xining was his wife, her surname was He. Who knew if He Rufei had communicated with her? This was also good. Since He Rufei was able to arrange spies in his residence, who knew if he wouldn't beat him at his own game? This time, he would let He Xining go home first to find out. In the middle of the night it began to snow again. It was freezing cold. He Yan groped his way out of bed in the dark. The room was pitch black and she didn't even light an oil lamp. Fortunately, she had long been used to being blind. Even if she didn't light a lamp, she wouldn't fall down when she walked around the room. After she finished dressing, she took out a short sword from the drawer and went out. The snow was very heavy. In order to make it easier for her to move, she wore very thin clothes. She only wore a thin layer of cotton underneath her night clothes. As soon as she went out, her snot was about to come out from the cold. There was a charcoal fire burning in the fragrant stable, giving off a weak light. The courtyard was quiet inside and outside. He Sui, his son, and Qing Mei were all sleeping soundly. There was also no movement in Qi Wu's room. He Yin quietly opened the door and walked out. There was snow everywhere, and the long street was covered in a silvery white. Lanterns hung under the eaves of the houses along the street, bright red. It was very lively. In less than 2 months, it would be the new year. The New Year's atmosphere was already there, although it was still a bit cold. He Yin exhaled and a white fog immediately appeared in front of her. It was strange to say that the Liangzhou Guard's winter was much colder than Shuajing's winter. However, at that time, they trained every day until they were drenched in sweat and forgot about the cold. Now that they were here, they really did stomp their feet in the cold. She had only walked a few steps when she almost reached the end of the street. She saw a carriage parked there. He Yin was stunned for a moment. In the middle of the night, there was no one on the empty street. It was as if she had seen a ghost when there was such a carriage in the middle of the road. He Yin narrowed her eyes and looked carefully. There was a coachman sitting in front of the carriage. When he saw her, he took off his hat. Fei Nu? He Yin said in surprise. Why are you here? Fei Nu did not speak. Instead, the curtain of the carriage was lifted and a person walked down. He was wearing a dark gold brocade robe with cloud patterns. His figure was tall and elegant. When he looked over, he was like a painting in the snowy night. It was Xiaoju. He walked over, his boots stepping on the snow, making a squeaking sound. He Yin waited for him to come closer and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping at night? What are you doing here?" Xiaoju raised his eyebrows and said disapprovingly, "What about you? Why did you go out in the middle of the night?" He Yin was speechless for a long time. "I couldn't sleep, so I came out to relax." Xiaoju sneered and stared at her calmly. "Eldest miss, you came out to relax and wear night clothes?" He Yin scratched her head. She knew that this person was very smart and would not be easy to fool. She frowned and said, "I came out to do something." She looked at Xiaoju and suddenly realized something. She looked back and glanced at him. "You followed me all day and even in the middle of the night? Xiaoju, even if I am your fiancé, you don't have to follow me so closely." "Xiaoju, what are you thinking?" He seemed to be speechless. "You went out in the morning and bought a short sword from the blacksmith shop in the west of the city. Tell me," he said lazily. "You went out so late at night. Did you kill or set fire?" "When I bought the short sword, didn't I get rid of Qi Wu?" He Yin was puzzled. "How did you know?" When she did these things, she was always very careful. She knew that Qi Wu would be suspicious if he found out, but it was not easy to get rid of that big guy. "It's not Qi Wu," Xiaoju said. "Anyway, I know." He glanced at the short sword that He Yin hung on her waist and said with some disdain, "Didn't I give you money so you can't buy a good sword? What does this have to do with the sword?" He Yin said, "The most important thing is the person who uses the sword and the swordsmanship. My swordsmanship is good. I don't need a good sword to shine." Xiaoju nodded and said, "You are diligent and thrifty." "Those are good words," He Yin asked. "Why do I feel like you are scolding me?" The snow outside didn't stop, and soon her hair and body were covered with a thin layer of frost. Xiaoju pulled her under the eaves of a house by the street, and stood on the outside, blocking most of the wind and snow. She only asked, "You haven't told me yet. It's so late, why did you bring a sword out?" Seeing that he could not hide it anymore, He Yin sighed and told the truth. "I was thinking that He Rufei must have some other relationship with the Yudo. He Rufei is a cautious person, so it's hard to find anything that can be used against him. I want to go to the He family to find other evidence. If I can find evidence that He Rufei is related to the Yudo, that would be the best." "The He family?" Xiaoju frowned slightly. "You plan to go alone?" "I was also a member of the He family in my previous life." He Yin leaned closer and whispered, "I am very familiar with the inside and outside of the He family. I also know secret passages that others don't know about. It's easy to sneak in. It's definitely not a problem for me to go alone." "No," Xiaoju interrupted her without thinking. "It's too dangerous." "No, what's so dangerous about it?" He Yin refuted. I can fight against 10 of the He family's guards. At this time, they are already asleep. The room He Rufei is living in now is the room that I used to live in. I know all the secret compartments in the bookshelves and the hidden compartments in the wooden drawers. When I finish looking, I will leave immediately. It won't be a problem. I have ambushed tens of thousands of Yudo's camps at night. There's nothing to be afraid of about the He family. He Rufei is already suspicious of you and will definitely increase the number of guards in the residence. It's not a good time to go to the He family now. If we wait any longer, I'm afraid that all the evidence will be destroyed. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on her body. After a moment she said, I'll go with you. What? He Yin immediately refused. If you go with me, you will become a burden. I can escape easily by myself. It will be very inconvenient if you go with me. Then you don't have to go. Xiao Ju, He Yin was angry. Why are you being so unreasonable? This person was so stubborn? But if she quarreled with him here, the neighbors would be woken up and she wouldn't be able to escape. He Yin was in a deadlock with him for a long time. Finally, she gave in and gritted her teeth. All right, but I really didn't expect that second young Master Xiao would be so clingy in private. Everyone says that second young Master Xiao is cold and unapproachable. Same to you. Xiao Ju crossed her arms and looked at her. Lady, he has the habit of going to other people's residences in the middle of the night to relax. He leaned over slightly and looked down at He Yin. His tone was so indifferent that it made people gnash their teeth. I'm afraid that if something happens, the husband will pay for his wife's debts. This person probably never lost an argument with others. He Yin was also annoyed and said fiercely, forget it. If you want to go, then go. But I'll say it in advance. When we really go to the He family, don't regret it. Xiao Ju smiled and reached out to her waist. He Yin quickly protected the belt. What are you doing? He took a deep breath. What do you think I'm going to do? A man and a woman alone in the middle of the night. There are many things that can be done. He Yin whispered. Then who knows what you're going to do? Yin, Xiao Ju said calmly. I'm just joking. He Yin smiled fawningly. Your sword is too lousy. Change it to this one. He took off his sword and handed it to He Yin. Isn't this the autumn drinking sword? He Yin was stunned. Xiao Ju had already stuffed the autumn drinking sword into her hand. She knew that the autumn drinking sword was precious and wanted to return it to him. Why are you giving it to me? Xiao Ju looked at her and smiled. Change it to this one. I don't want other people to say that my Xiao family is poor and embarrassing me. What other people? He Yin quickly said. Pay. We're going to the He family today. We definitely won't alarm anyone. How can other people see us? Without waiting for He Yin to finish, Xiao Ju had already pulled out the short sword at her waist and walked forward. Take it. He Yin had no choice but to follow. Fei Nu stopped the carriage at the side of the road. The three of them left together and rushed towards the He family. The He family residence was located in the west of the city. The residence didn't look as elegant as the Su family residence, but it was still considered imposing. Fei Nu was waiting outside the residence. He Yin brought Xiao Ju to the backyard wall. When they reached a place, he stopped and said in a low voice, Here, this is my secret passage. Xiao Ju stared at the hole in front of him, which could barely allow one person to crawl through, and asked calmly, Your so-called secret passage is a dog hole? Shu, He Yin put a finger to his lips. Lower your voice. This dog hole isn't an ordinary dog hole. I dare say that no one in the He family knows about it. When I was young, I disguised myself as a man. However, I didn't have much strength. When I was with other boys, I was always worried that I would be exposed. My family was also afraid that I would be exposed too much outside and cause trouble, so they locked me up in the residence. Before I entered the Xianchangguan, every day before dawn, I would crawl out of this dog hole and climb to the capital's Donghuang mountain to help the monks carry water and chop firewood. In the beginning, the skin on my hands was very worn out. Later on, after calluses grew, I was able to practice martial arts with shirtu hanging from my wrist. The youths in the Xianchangguan are very powerful. If I hadn't secretly climbed the mountain to practice, I'm afraid that I would have been even more miserable in the Xianchangguan. Ah, her heart was moved. Could it be that at that time, I helped the monks in the temple too much work. So Buddha saw my sincerity and gave me a chance to live another life? No wonder everyone always says that we should build good karma. It's true, don't you think so? She turned to look at Xiaoju. Xiaoju pinched her forehead and said, So what you mean is you want me to crawl through the dog hole? Yes, He Yin said. I already said that you must come with me. So don't regret it. It's not like I didn't remind you. No. Xiaoju slightly frowned and turned her head away, as if she was disgusted by it. I'll climb over the wall. Don't. There are traps everywhere in the He family's walls. He Rufei must have rearranged them. I also don't know where they are. If you trigger the traps, all our previous efforts will be wasted. He Yin looked at her. Then why don't you be like Fei Nu and wait for me outside? I can go in by myself. No. Young master, please do me a favor, He Yin said helplessly. I can't do this. I can't do that. What do you want? Xiaoju looked at the dog hole for a moment without any expression. Suddenly, she lifted the corner of her robe and half knelt down. She turned her head to He Yin and said, You go first. This time, He Yin was really shocked. You really want to crawl through? Hurry up. Xiaoju couldn't bear it anymore. He Yin originally wanted to use the dog hole to make Xiaoju back off. He didn't expect her to really crawl through it. For a moment, he was filled with emotions. Xiaoju's sacrifice was really too big. If the soldiers of the Nine Flags Battalion knew that their commander-in-chief didn't sleep and crawled through a dog hole in the middle of the night, they would definitely kill her. However, He Yin didn't purposely make things difficult for her. This dog hole in the He family's house was dug by her personally. The He family didn't like to raise dogs. He Yin was the one who personally raised the stray dogs outside. This place was much safer than climbing over the wall, as Xiaoju had said. Then follow me, He Yin whispered. Be gentle. She didn't mind crawling through the dog hole at all. After all, she had crawled through it since she was young. It had been a long time since she last crawled through it. She felt quite familiar with it. She moved her body and crawled in like a loach. Xiaoju endured it and crawled in as well. The walls of the He residence were thick and this hole was dug by He Yin when he was young, so it wasn't very big. With his current adult stature, it seemed a little narrow. As soon as he crawled out, before he could stand firm, he saw a yellow thing under the weak light of the lantern pounce over with a whoosh. Xiaoju was about to make a move when He Yin whispered in surprise, Air Mao. The thing called Air Mao ran in front of He Yin, rolled around, and grabbed He Yin's leg affectionately. It was a yellow dog. Xiaoju asked, What is this? It's my pet, He Yin whispered. I thought Air Mao would be chased out after I died. I didn't expect it to still be here. To be precise, when He Yin was young, he picked up a stray dog and brought it home. He named it De Mao. The He family didn't like dirty stray dogs. However, at that time, He Yin didn't have any friends. When he was lonely, it was good to have a yellow dog as a companion. He begged Madame He to let De Mao stay in the residence. De Mao gave birth to a litter of puppies. However, the weather was too cold. Other than Air Mao, none of them survived. The one that survived, Air Mao, was a mute. He Rufei removed all traces of He Yin. He Yin thought that he would never see Air Mao again. He didn't expect to see it again. However, Air Mao usually lived in the backyard and caught mice to eat. It wasn't that He Rufei didn't want to get rid of it, but that he had forgotten about it. It seems like it recognized me. He Yin looked at Air Mao, who was wagging its tail happily at him. He sighed. I was classmates with you, Lin Shuanghe, and Yin He for so long. You didn't recognize me. Your eyesight is not as good as Air Mao's. Air Mao foolishly stuck its tongue out at He Yin and smiled. Xiaoju closed her eyes and said patiently, Now is not the time for you to reunite and reminisce. I know. He Yin gestured to Air Mao to sit down. The yellow dog obediently sat down. Air Mao, you stay here and keep watch for me. She turned to Xiaoju and said, Come with me. The He residence was very big. He Yin walked very cautiously. Everywhere he went, he would hide in the dark to see if there were any servants around. Although she didn't enter the He residence a few days ago, she secretly wandered around the outside of the He residence. The number of servants in the He residence was much more than when she was still here. She didn't need to think to know that it was He Rufei's doing. Maybe He Rufei thought that the He residence had more servants, so he could maintain the image of General Fei Hong. Or maybe he had a guilty conscience. The courtyard that He Rufei lived in was also the courtyard that He Yin used to live in. It was the deepest and most innermost room in the He residence. Xiao Ju asked in a low voice, "Why is it so far away?" "Because, young master, he was born ugly and eccentric," He Yin said. "He doesn't like to interact too much with others." There were very few servants in her courtyard, and it was very secluded. If He Yin was a quiet child, it would be fine. But children always had many fantasies. She was originally lively and curious about everything. Because of her identity, she could only stay in the courtyard and play by herself. After a long time, even if she wasn't eccentric, she was raised to be eccentric. As a child, she couldn't do this or that. Even the servant girls couldn't serve her, let alone play with her. After a long time, she would find fun for herself. For example, she used a tree branch to draw pictures in the sand. She could accurately draw every room in the He residence because she had walked through it thousands of times in her mind. He Yin had once suspected that after she joined the army, the reason why she was always so sensitive to the terrain and had a photographic memory was actually because of the experience she had when she was young. "There are changes in the structure of the residence," He Yin said in a low voice. "We have to be careful." It was already very late at night. The people on night watch were all in the outer courtyard. There were no movements in the residence, so they could be a little more at ease. Seeing that they were about to reach He Rufei's courtyard, He Yin became more and more nervous. When they turned into a long corridor and were about to walk forward, He Yan's footsteps paused. Suddenly, she quietly pulled Xiao Ju into an empty tea room. Xiao Ju was about to speak when He Yin covered her mouth. "So there's someone here." There was the sound of footsteps outside. It was probably a servant who went to the outhouse at night. The footsteps passed by the door, and the sound gradually faded away. When there was no more sound outside, He Yin let out a sigh of relief. When she turned her head, she was stunned. The moon had come out at some point. It shone through the window and shone on the ground. Xiao Ju was pushed to the wall by her, his back against it. He Yin was so nervous that her whole body was almost lying on top of him, but he didn't move at all. His hands were slightly behind him, as if he was deliberately avoiding her. He Yin covered his mouth, looking like a female hooligan who was molesting others. She was shocked and subconsciously retracted her hand. The young man looked at her indifferently. Suddenly, he curved his lips and said silently, "Are you taking advantage of me?" He Yin almost choked. She shook her head. No, I was too anxious just now. I didn't do it on purpose." The young man nodded with a faint smile. His eyes clearly showed that he didn't believe her. He Yin couldn't say anything. Anyway, it wasn't the first time she molested Xiao Ju. She didn't care if it was just 1 or 2 times. She glanced outside through the door. Seeing that there was no one, she whispered, "Let's go." Chapter 224. Other than the servant who woke up in the middle of the night to use the toilet, the rest of the journey was smooth, and they did not meet anyone else. He Yin carefully walked to the door of a room and whispered in Xiao Ju's ear, "This is He Rufei's study room." So this was He Yan's study room. But now it was He Rufei's study room. After walking around and finding no other hidden mechanisms, He Yin gently pushed the door open and walked in. This was the place where he lived, so he was very familiar with it. Xiao Ju followed him in. As soon as they entered, He Yin was surprised. The bookshelves were still the same as before, and the table was the same as before. But the decorations in the study room were many times more than before. There were all kinds of porcelain and antiques. It was completely different from when He Yin lived in the past. She guessed that He Rufei probably put all the things that His Majesty gave him in the study room. She did not know who he was showing them off to. The bookshelves were originally half filled with books, but now they were full. In the middle of the wall, there was a sword hanging. The blade of the sword was green and the scabbard had a bit of green color. It was Qinglang. She was stunned for a moment, and her eyes unconsciously focused on the Qinglang sword. She wanted to reach out for the sword, but when her fingers were about to touch the blade, she retracted her hand. Xiao Ju asked, "What's wrong?" He Yin shook his head. Now is not the time. Even if she could steal the Qinglang sword back tonight, Hirufei would definitely report it to the officials tomorrow. The sword in her hand would become a stolen property, and she would not be able to show it in public. Wouldn't this be an insult to the Qinglang sword? So now is not the time. He thought for a moment, got up and walked to the bookshelf. He squatted down and half of his body was on the ground. He reached into the innermost part of the bookshelf and felt around. When he touched a familiar bulge, the hidden compartment made a slight click sound. It was actually an empty compartment. He took out a small palm-sized box from the compartment. Xiao Ju asked, "What is this?" "Exquisite box." He replied in a low voice. "Back then, His Majesty gave me a reward. This is the only one in the world. After I left, I gave it to Hirufei. I don't think he was willing to throw it away." The hidden compartment on the bookshelf was made by Hien in the past. This exquisite box was also very precious. Before she married into the Su family, she couldn't take these things with her, so she gave them all to Hirufei. The jewel box was very suitable for storing secret scrolls. Even the most outstanding craftsman in the world would not be able to open it. Only the person who had set up the opening method for the jewel box would know how to open it. Moreover, the way to solve the problem could only be set up once. With Hirufei's temperament, he wouldn't throw away such a precious item. What's more, from Hirufei's point of view, Hien was already dead, and he was the only one in the world who knew how to open the exquisite box, so of course he was happy and relaxed. However, he did not expect that Hien would come back from the dead. This time, it was actually more convenient for him to do things. "I don't know what he put inside," Hien said in his heart. He picked up the exquisite box, and according to his memory, he gently turned the lock on the blind man's door. In just a moment, with a paw sound, the lid of the exquisite box opened. The two of them looked into the box. In He Erforin's room, He Xining and He Erforin sat at the head of the bed. In her hand, she was still holding the military book that she stole from Hien's old residence. She asked, "Mother, what is this? Did my sister leave it behind? Why did she keep this?" Her voice was very low. In the room, there was only a small oil lamp at the head of the bed. The servant girls were all chased out of the room. He Xining only knew that she hadn't seen her mother for a long time, and wanted to sleep with her at night, so that she could take care of her. Now, she didn't dare to trust anyone, and didn't dare to keep anyone by her side, especially the people who were brought out by the Su family. He Erforin stared blankly at the military book in her hand. There were traces of tears in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. He Xining felt that her mother must know something, and her heart became even more anxious. "Mother, why aren't you saying anything? Are you hiding something from me? I always feel that Su Jihing is strange." "Elder sister." She wanted to say that perhaps Hien's death wasn't as the rumors said, but when she saw He Erforin, she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. If Hien's death was really not simple, He Erforin would be even more sad when she found out. Right now, her mother's health was not good, so she couldn't make things worse. "Inger, don't worry about these things." After a long time, He Erforin opened her mouth. Her voice was particularly tired. "You just need to live your life well." "How can I live my life well? I don't want to die like my elder sister without knowing why," He Xining blurted out. As soon as the words came out of her mouth, she regretted it. He Erforin's face turned pale and she coughed twice. He Xining quickly picked up the handkerchief next to her and wiped her mouth. When the handkerchief fell down, it was splashed with blood, which looked shocking. He Xining was shocked and said in a panic, "Mother, why are you so sick?" When she came, she already knew that He Erforin had been bedridden for many days, but the He family only said that it was a common cold, and that she would be fine after resting at home for a few days. But now it seemed that it was much more serious. "Father, didn't you find a doctor? What the hell is going on?" He Xining was anxious and wanted to get out of bed. "I'll ask someone to bring an invitation to invite a doctor." "Don't go." "Madam," he grabbed her hand. She looked like a weak woman, but when she grabbed her hand, she was particularly strong, as if she wanted to use up all her strength. "Mother, this is an old problem. It doesn't matter. It's okay." He Xining was about to cry. "Mother, why won't you tell me anything? I feel that there's something in the house that's hiding from me, but I don't know anything." Before she got married, She was carefree and naive. When her eldest sister passed away and she married Su Zhiheng, she made a fuss for a period of time. But soon, she was moved by Su Zhiheng's gentleness and thoughtfulness. As a girl who had never experienced the dangers of the world, she naively thought that she could be protected for the rest of her life. But when some ugly truth was revealed, she vaguely glimpsed a trace of filth and danger. Then she felt powerless as a woman. He Erforin said slowly, your eldest sister is dead, and mother only has you as a daughter. She looked at He Xining lovingly and patted He Xining's head comfortingly, just like when He Xining was still a child. You have to remember, whether it's the He family or the Su family, don't trust a single person. Mother doesn't have the ability to protect your sister, and I can't protect you. If you want to live well, then don't look, don't ask, and don't listen. He Xining said blankly, my eldest sister became blind not long after she married into the Su family. Didn't she lose her sight? But she still died. A trace of pain flashed through He Er's eyes. Mother, you just need to tell me, did my eldest sister leave this military book behind? Why does Su Zhiheng value it so much? Also, eldest brother comes to the Su family every few days, not to see me, but to look for Su Zhiheng. And you? She said. Are you under house arrest by father? He Er looked at the woman in front of her. Although they were biological sisters, she always felt that He Yan and He Xining didn't look alike. He Yan was strong, independent, silent and quiet. She wore a mask since she was a child. So now that she thought about it, she couldn't remember He Yan's appearance when he was a child. But when she grew up and returned to the He family as a woman, she only saw him a few times. He was a girl who was born with a heroic spirit, and had a resolute and courageous appearance. He Xining was different. She was soft and cuddly, like a snow-white dumpling, and was very likable. She would cry when someone stepped on her foot and act coquettishly for a beautiful dress. These two daughters had completely different temperaments, so she took it for granted that He Yan was born strong, and He Xining was born to be loved. Until He Yan died. One day, she suddenly realized that perhaps in the past, He Yan was just like He Xining. They would cry when they were wronged, and they would yearn to have something they liked. Just like a strong girl would also need her mother's care and love. And the little girl in front of her, who always grabbed her clothes and clamored to buy candy, had unknowingly grown up. He Xining didn't know that when she was serious and stubborn in pursuit of the truth, she was very similar to her dead eldest sister. But even so, she still couldn't say anything. The more she knew, the more dangerous it would be for He Xining. She had already lost a daughter. She couldn't lose another one. Before Madam He could say anything, she suddenly heard someone shouting from outside. There's a thief. A thief has entered the residence. Quickly catch the thief. Immediately, the entire He family became lively. A thief? He Xining subconsciously shrank to the head of the bed and said, which thief is so blind that he dares to enter our residence? Madam He grabbed her arm. Don't talk and don't go out. Be careful. He Xining nodded. On the other side, He Yan was running around the courtyard with Xiao Ju, secretly cursing He Rufei for being cunning. Although He Rufei couldn't make any changes in the way of opening the exquisite box, this person was very suspicious, and actually installed a layer of mechanism inside the box. Once the exquisite box was opened, there would be a whistling sound. In this way, as long as someone opened the exquisite box, they would be discovered. However, when she opened it just now, she clearly saw that there were a few letters inside. She put the letters into her bosom. Since He Rufei didn't leave the exquisite box empty, and even deliberately tampered with it, these letters must be very important. Today's trip wasn't considered to be in vain. The bodyguards are all awake. Xiao Ju reminded her. Do we run or fight? I'm carrying your sword. Once the sword is unsheathed, it will be exposed. We can't fight. Ian looked down and thought. Come with me. She knew every corner of the He family's courtyard by heart, so it was easy to avoid people. But she didn't know if it was because He Rufei was very guilty these days. There were more bodyguards than servants in the residence. At this moment, when the whistle sounded, torches and people came from all directions. They're over there, Chase. The general said that if we catch the assassin, we don't need to leave him alive. Life or death. Yen sneered in her heart. Unexpectedly, she was so scared. She was even more sure that the letters in her bosom were not simple. She pulled Xiaoju and ran all the way. When they passed by a house, she hid inside. Madam, he was pulling He Xining to lean against the head of the bed. She was very nervous as she hugged the quilt. Unexpectedly, there were 2 more people in the room. He Xining was so scared that she was about to scream. The next moment, a cold sword was placed on her neck. The masked man in black said, "Shut up. If you dare to scream, I'll kill you." He Xining was so scared that she immediately shut up. He Yan held the long sword in her hand. She was very annoyed. She originally thought that since Madame He's courtyard was the closest to the outer wall, it would be easy to pass through. Who knew that Madame He was still awake in the middle of the night? He Xining was also here. It was so late at night. What was she doing here instead of sleeping? Were the mother and daughter whispering to each other? He Yan's heart immediately gave birth to a sour taste. But what was this now? She was holding her biological mother and biological sister hostage? Perhaps the commotion inside had spread to the outside. As a maidservant outside asked, "Second madam? Did something happen to second madam?" He Yan's heart skipped a beat. Before she could threaten her, Madam He had already spoken. Her tone was normal. "It's nothing. It's just a little cough." He Yan breathed a sigh of relief when there was no more noise outside. She looked at Xiaoju behind her. She was vigilantly staring at the door to prevent anyone from rushing in. "Listen," He Yan said in a low voice. "I don't mean to hurt the 2 of you. Give me the key to the backyard, and let the 2 of us go." He Xining said in a trembling voice. "Who knows if you'll kill us to keep us quiet?" He Yan was a little surprised. His sister looked so obedient, but he didn't expect her to be so brave. She deliberately lowered her voice and said in a sinister voice, "Do you think you have the right to talk terms with me?" He Xining's face turned pale. She didn't dare to speak. On the other hand, Madam He ignored the sword on He Xining's neck. She got off the bed and took out a key from the drawer. She handed it to her and said, "You can leave now." He Yan was very surprised. He thought that Madam He would also talk terms with her, or find a way to inform the He family. He Yan was even prepared to be on guard. But he didn't expect her to be so peaceful. He Yan couldn't help but look at her. The woman in front of him was staring at him. He Yan couldn't understand her gaze. She seemed to be looking at He Yan, but also seemed to be looking at another person through He Yan. If He Yan didn't know that he was wearing a black mask, he would have suspected that Madam He had recognized him. Seeing that He Yan didn't move, Madam He pushed her again. "The bodyguards will come soon. Let's go." Xiaoju nodded to her and said, "Let's go." He Yan didn't care about anything else. She grabbed the key to the backyard and turned to leave. The moment she passed by, she suddenly felt something stuffed in her hand. She didn't have time to look at it carefully. She subconsciously put the thing in her hand into her arms, took the key, opened the door of the backyard and ran out. Madam He was right. The pursuers would be here in a blink of an eye. They came through the dog hole, but they didn't have time to go back. Since they were exposed, they directly went through the back wall. Just as the guard was about to chase after them, he suddenly felt a pain in his knee. Looking down, he saw a yellow dog biting his calf. The pain made him wail like a ghost and howl like a wolf. Unable to catch up, he could only watch as the 2 black-clothed men disappeared into the night. The entire residence was in chaos. He Xining finally managed to calm herself down with great difficulty. She reignited the lamp on the table and patted her chest as she said, "I was really scared to death just now. That person's eyes were so fierce. I was really afraid that he would kill us. Mother, if Uncle knew that we let the assassins go, even if it was to save his life, he would be angry. If no one found out about this, let's not tell anyone for the time being. Mother?" Madam He just stared at her hands blankly, as if she didn't hear what she just said. He Xining said anxiously, "Mother." Madam He came back to her senses and looked at her. "I know. Don't tell anyone about this. Don't tell Master Su either." He Xining felt strange. His mother's expression when she saw the men in black was very strange. Then she thought of something. But did those 2 men really come to steal something? I saw that they were empty-handed, so they didn't steal anything. My military book. By the way, where is my military book? When she was talking to second Madam He on the bed, the military book was placed at the head of the bed. Now that it was empty, He Xining was startled. Oh no, those two couldn't have stolen my military book, right? But why did they steal it? Mother, did you see my military book? Madam He coughed and said, no need to look for it. I gave the military book to the men in black just now. Why? He Xining didn't expect that Madam He would do such a thing. That thing will be a disaster in our hands. Madam He looked empty. Those two men came to steal, but they were empty-handed. I don't know if they stole what they wanted to steal. If they stole it, it would be the icing on the cake. If they didn't, it would be a timely help. They didn't take the risk to come to the He family in vain. Mother, He Xining said angrily. How can it be like that? It was difficult for me to get that thing from the Su family. Remember. Madam He's expression became serious. Whether it's the assassins tonight or the military book of the Su family, don't mention it to anyone. He Xining originally came to solve his doubts. Now that he didn't understand the mystery, there were more and more things he didn't understand, but he couldn't do anything. In the end he could only say, I know. I won't mention it to anyone. Fei Nu was outside, so when he received He Yan and Madam He, the three of them immediately hid in another courtyard. Where is this place? He Yan asked curiously. I'm in another courtyard in Shuo City. Sometimes it's inconvenient to do things in the mansion, so I'll do it here. Xiao Ju replied. He Yan thought for a moment and understood. Xiao Jing and Madam He were very kind. Xiao Ju's experience meant that his actions wouldn't be understood by most people. This was good. If they couldn't see it, it would save them a lot of trouble. He Yan took out the letter from the exquisite box and showed it to Xiao Ju, showing off. Look, this trip is very fruitful. I already said that going to the He family would definitely make a profit. Xiao Ju glanced at her and said, it's very dangerous. It's only this time, don't do it again. She paused and said, starting tomorrow, He Rufei will use this as an excuse to search the entire Shuo city. You should stay at home for the next few days and don't act rashly. If these letters are lost, the first person He Rufei will suspect is me. I'm afraid it will implicate you. It's okay. I'm Marquis Wen, personally appointed by His Majesty. If he can't produce evidence, he can't do anything to me. He Yan couldn't wait to open the letter. Let's see what's in the letter first. He Rufei hid it so well. I don't believe it's a love poem. There were a total of 3 letters. He Yan and Xiao Ju opened each letter. It wasn't long, but after reading it, both of their expressions changed. Bastard. He Yan put down the letter in his hand and couldn't help but punch the table. There's actually such a heartless person in the world. Of the 3 letters, 2 were for Yudo and 1 was for Su Jingfu. Although He Yan guessed that He Rufei might have a relationship with Su Jingfu when he saw He Rufei's servant Ding Yi in Liangzhou City, he didn't have any evidence. The letter in front of him clearly stated in black and white that this was indeed the case. He Rufei really did make a deal with the Yudo after the battle in Huayuan. He Rufei gave the Fuyue army's military intelligence to the Yudo and purposely won a bitter victory. The price was to establish a relationship with Prime Minister Su and express his sincerity in cooperating with Su Jingfu. He would also advocate for peace when the Yudo emissary came to the capital to ask for peace and facilitate the Yudo to open a market in Dawei. He Rufei's greatest fear was that his identity would be exposed, and that the world would find out that he was different from the General Fei Hong of the past. But in order to hide his identity, he actually colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country. He didn't care about the lives of the people of Dawei. Xiao Ju looked at the letter in her hand. It was troublesome for He Rufei to establish a relationship with Su Jingfu. Su Jingfu was the most powerful person among the civil officials. Most of the civil officials were in favor of peace, and only a few generals were in favor of war. However, General Fei Hong had always had a good reputation among the generals. If He Rufei was in favor of peace, the generals who were in favor of war would be few and far between. He Yan took a deep breath. Once such a shameless person enters the officialdom, he becomes even worse. He just has to use my name. It's really disgusting. Don't worry, Xiao Ju said calmly. I'll take care of everything. He Yan suddenly remembered that when she left the He estate, Madam He stuffed something into her hand. But at that time, the situation was critical, and she didn't have time to take a closer look. She just put it in her pocket. Now that she finally had time, she took it out of her pocket. It was a book. The pages were wrinkled and yellowed from being used for a long time. The corners of the book were all curled up. This book had probably been read many times, and the pages were very thin. As soon as Hien opened it, he was stunned. Xiaoju stood behind her, her gaze also falling on the book. "This is my military book," Hien muttered. She lowered her head and flipped through a few pages. Yes, it was her handwriting. Ever since she joined the army in her previous life, she had read many military books. She read the most precious books repeatedly, and wrote her own notes and notes at the side. Later, when she got married, everything related to General Feihong had to be abandoned. She couldn't take her sword, her war horse, and her trusted subordinates. In the end, Hien secretly hid a military book in her dowry box and brought it to the Su estate. In front of others, she was dignified and gentle. She was no different from an ordinary woman. But in private, she missed the days when she was free on the battlefield. Every time her fingers touched the book, she would think of her comrades who had gone through fire and water with her in the army camp. She hid this military book under the bedpost where she slept. Now she found it again. Chapter 225. The military book was still the same as before, and it reminded Hien of the time when she had just married into the He family. But after she became blind, she never took the military book out again. She thought that the book was either never found or burned by Su Zhiheng. She didn't expect that it would return to her. But how did the book end up in the hands of He family's second wife? What do you think my mother means by giving me this book? Hien looked at Xiaoju. Could it be that she recognized me? Without waiting for Xiaoju to speak, Hien immediately shook her head in denial. That's impossible. Even in my previous life, the number of times I met her could be counted on one hand. What I looked like, my mother probably doesn't even remember clearly, let alone mention it now. She laughed self-deprecatingly. Why am I starting to let my imagination run wild now? But when she recalled the moment when He family's second wife stuffed the military book into her hands, she vaguely caught a hint of longing and reluctance in her eyes. How was that possible? He family's second wife had another daughter. Compared to her, He Xining had been with her since she was a child, and she was the real pearl in her mother's palm. Unlike her, she had never even called her mother. Hien always thought that when facing the He family, her heart was as hard as iron. But when she rushed into He family's second wife's room, she saw He Xining and her mother sleeping on the same bed. Even after she got married, she could still talk to her mother intimately at night. It turned out that she was jealous. Thinking about it carefully, in her previous life, her family had always been very weak. Her parents were like that, and her husband was like that. Although it was already a matter of her previous life, and although she had people by her side now, there were some regrets that she couldn't make up for in her life. It was like a hole covered by sand, and when the wind blew, it was still empty. It was a shocking sight. Hien didn't want Xiaoju to see her disappointment, so she changed the topic. However, this military book just solved my urgent problem. He Rufei could also use the excuse that the handwriting had changed after a long time had passed since the handwriting was found in the Xianchang dojo. As long as I carefully compare He Rufei's current handwriting, I will be able to find some clues. Moreover, it just so happens that it is a military book. Heaven is helping me. Xiaoju nodded. The correspondence with Yudo will come in handy when the time is right. He Rufei must have kept these letters because he was afraid that Yudo and Su Xiang would burn the bridge after crossing the river, so he deliberately hid them in the exquisite box just in case. Hien pondered. I really don't know if I should call him cunning or stupid. It was precisely because of his paranoia that his weakness fell into the hands of others. It's not safe for me to keep this. Hien thought for a while and said to Xiaoju, you should keep it. No matter how daring He Rufei is, he won't dare to go to Xiao family and behave atrociously. She raised her head and looked at the sky. It won't be long before dawn. Today she was delayed for a whole night. I have to go back. When dawn comes, He Rufei will send people to search the entire Shuo capital. I'm afraid that something will happen. I'll send you back. Hien nodded. Although she tried to pretend as usual, The matter of Madame He still weighed heavily on her heart. Although at that time, no one knew that she wanted to force Madame He to open the door for her, but who knew if Hirufei would suspect Madame He? Even if she was from the He family, Hirufei was so cruel and merciless to her. So what if she was Madame He? He Yuanliang didn't care about the relationship between father and daughter. How much of the relationship between husband and wife would there be left? Don't worry, I will send people to sneak into the He family and watch over Madame He. As if he saw her worry, he said, I won't let anything happen to her. Ian raised her head and looked at him. She was slightly relieved. Then thank you very much. Even so, she still looked a little unhappy. Xiaoju's eyes lightly swept over her and said, Hien. What? It's my birthday in 2 days. Hien said. Oh. She suddenly reacted and raised her head. Then what do you want? I can buy it for you. Do you have money? He asked. Didn't you give me a banknote last time? Hien answered very smoothly. When she saw his expression, she laughed embarrassedly, as if it was wrong to use someone else's money to buy a gift for someone else. But I only have the money you gave me. I'm not a good embroidery woman. It's impossible for me to embroider a handkerchief in 1 or 2 days. Why didn't you say so earlier? It's too late for me to do it now. How about I go pick up a piece of shirtu for you and use an axe to chop it into a shape you like? When they were in the Liang province guards, Chu Zhao didn't sleep in the middle of the night just to pick up shirtu. Perhaps all rich young masters had this kind of strange hobby. Xiao Ju's face darkened, as if he was thinking of a bad memory. No need. Then what do you need? Hien moved closer to him and asked. After being interrupted by Xiao Ju, her depressed mood eased a lot. At least for now. She was sincerely worried about young Master Zhao's birthday gift. I want to go to the night market. Xiao Ju glanced at her. Take the banknotes with you. If I like something, buy it for me. Now Hien understood. Second young Master Xiao wanted to enjoy the feeling of being pampered. But this kind of thing was usually done by men accompanying women to the night market, buying flowers, jade, pearls and hairpins for the women. Why was it reversed when it came to Xiao Ju? I didn't expect you to have this kind of weird hobby, Hien muttered behind her back. What did you say? Xiao Ju raised an eyebrow. Hien turned around and answered with a smile. I said, since it's our young master's birthday wish, even if we have to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, we will fulfill it for you. Isn't it just going to the night market? I'll take all the banknotes with me and buy you whatever you want. How about it? The girl's face was so close that she didn't seem to notice that she was too close to the other person. Xiao Ju tilted her head slightly and the corners of her mouth lifted slightly as she said, Okay. By the time Xiao Ju sent Hien back to the Fu, it was already very late. Hien decided to go to bed and catch up on sleep. When he woke up, it was already noon. Qingmei had finished preparing lunch. Hien rubbed his sleepy eyes and sat at the table. He picked up his chopsticks and asked, Qingmei, did anything happen outside today? Qingmei was helping Hien ladle some soup. Hearing this, she asked in surprise, Miss, how did you know that something happened outside? This servant saw that you were sleeping soundly, so I didn't dare to wake you up. When I went out to buy groceries, I heard that General Fei Hong's residence was robbed last night. Some valuable objects were stolen from General Fei Hong's residence. Now the city gates have been sealed, and the authorities are searching for suspicious people. After saying this, she continued to mutter, But how can there be such a daring thief in this world? He actually dared to steal from General Fei Hong's residence. Isn't he seeking his own death? What she didn't know was that the daring thief was sitting at the table, calmly drinking the hot soup in his bowl. Hien only needed to think about how flustered Hirufei was right now. His heart was overjoyed, and he even wanted to drink a few more bowls of soup. Thinking about it, with Hirufei's suspicious personality, for a long time to come. No, it should be said that as long as those letters were not found, Hirufei would be on pins and needles, and would not be able to sleep at night. It really was very satisfying. Hien's guess was not wrong. At this moment, the entire Hifu was in a mess. From last night until now, all the suspicious people in the Shuo capital had been investigated, but there was still no news of them. Hirufei's expression was very ugly. The servants did not dare to provoke him at this critical moment. Rufei, what should we do now? He Yuanqing was very nervous. For he Rufei to go through so much trouble to find the lost object at all costs. He had already guessed a little. If this thing fell into someone else's hands, it would be a fatal weakness, not to mention in the current situation. Father, don't you think it's strange? He Rufei coldly said. The person who came in and out of the Fu as if there was no one there. He knows everything about the Fu like the back of his hand. He even knows the secret in my study room, and can open the exquisite box. You're saying that there's a spy in the Fu? He Yuanqing asked. Not necessarily, he Rufei said. But right now, all the servants in the Fu are children of the house. Moreover, other than you, no one can enter your study room, not to mention the secret compartment in the bookshelf. If there's a spy, who could it be? Could it be? He Yuanqing's eyes narrowed. You suspect it's your second uncle? He doesn't have the guts or the brains. He Rufei's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. He Yuanliang was even more useless now, so when there was something to discuss in the Fu, he Rufei was too lazy to call him. He Yuanliang was also happy to be relaxed. He wasn't someone who could handle things. The only useful thing he did in his life was to raise He Yan, his daughter. Other than that, he was a piece of trash. Then you suspect. Second uncle doesn't have the guts, but second aunt might not. Because of He Yan's matter, I'm afraid she already has a grudge against us. Women have always been emotional. Who knows if she won't hold a grudge, and do something unexpected? He Yuanqing frowned. If that's the case, then we can't keep this woman. He Rufei shook his head. We can't act rashly now. If it's really her, then it'll be easy to deal with. At least we can follow the clues to find the mastermind behind the scenes. Moreover, we have more hostages in our hands, so it'll be easier to do things in the future. But won't there be trouble if we keep her? As long as we don't let her leave the Fu and leave someone to watch over her, then there's no harm in keeping her alive. He Rufei coldly said. It's just that He Xining also returned to the Fu last night. On the day he returned, a thief broke into the Fu. I don't know if it's a coincidence. He Xining? He Yuanqing's face darkened. She's a member of the He family. How dare she? It's just a suspicion, He Rufei interrupted her. Find someone to get close to her and see if she really doesn't know anything. If second aunt wants to protect He Xining, then she probably won't tell her the truth. It's just that Su Zhiheng has been acting a bit strange recently. Thinking of Su Zhiheng, He Rufei felt a wave of displeasure. Working with this kind of idiot was probably the most annoying thing. Leave this to me, He Yuanqing pondered for a moment. You stay in the Fu and wait for news. He got up and left. After He Yuanqing left, He Rufei sat alone in a chair. His thoughts were hard to calm down. Just as He Yuanqing said, his first thought was that there was a traitor in the Fu. That's why he knew the Fu like the back of his hand. But he clearly knew that the hidden compartment on the bookshelf in the study wasn't something a traitor could find. There was also the exquisite box. When He Yan handed the exquisite box to him, he once said that in this world, other than him and his sister, no one else could open this box. Later He Yan died. In this world, only he could open it. That's why He Rufei put a few secret letters in the box. Just to make himself feel more at ease, he added another layer of mechanism to the box. The reason was that he would never encounter this mechanism in his life. He didn't expect to hear a whistle last night. The exquisite box was opened. Either He Yan was lying at that time, and other than the two of them, there was a third person in this world who knew how to open this box. Or, Su Zhiheng's terrified expression floated in front of his eyes. His voice was filled with indescribable panic. It's He Yan. She's back, she's back. Pa. He Rufei suddenly swept the teacup on the table to the ground. He stood up and looked at the long sword on the wall. The sword was green and serene, emitting a faint luster. The corner of his mouth twitched. She's back, he wasn't afraid. The next day, the news of a thief in General Fei Hong's Fu spread like wildfire. But no one was able to find the thief. The entire Shuajing city was in chaos. He Yan had a rare day of relaxation. He only drank tea and slept at home. Qing Mei was a little surprised. 2 days later, the sky turned dark early. There was no snow outside, and it was a rare sunny night. After He Yan finished washing up, he planned to go out with Xiao Ju. Previously, after visiting the He estate that night, Xiao Ju had told her that today was his birthday and wanted He Yan to accompany him to the night market. They agreed to meet at the entrance of the house. He Yan estimated that it was getting late and should be going out. Qing Mei picked out a silver red embroidered shirt for her and a smoky silk brocade dress of the same color for her. She also meticulously combed her hair into a bun, with the tail of the ponytail hanging over her shoulders. It made her look even cuter. He Yan scrutinized her in front of the mirror and felt a little uncomfortable. This dress is a little too flashy. Today is Xiao Ju's birthday, not mine. Why is there a need to be so grand? Qing Mei put a pair of coral earrings on her ears and smiled. But miss, you're going to the night market with Military Governor Xiao. There are so many people at the night market, they'll definitely recognize the two of you. Of course it has to be grand. After all, you're going out to show off. He Yan stopped her from continuing to insert hairpins into his hair. Alright, that's fine. I think it's about time. I'll leave first. After saying this, she went to take the rabbit fur cloak that was placed on top of the trunk. This cloak was originally from Lady He's trunk. Among all of her clothes, this was the only one that looked a little plain. Lady He probably didn't like this cloak, so it was placed under the trunk. However, this was the warmest cloak that He Yan could find. Speaking of which, when he first woke up, He Yan saw that eldest Mrs. body was so weak that a gust of wind could blow her over. However, her trunk was filled with clothes that were as thin as cicadas' wings. It was as if winter had never passed. He Yan picked up the cloak and was about to put it on when Qing Mei snatched it away. What are you doing? She was puzzled. Miss, you can just wear this. Don't take this cloak. Qing Mei looked at the rabbit fur cloak in her hand. This one is very old. It looks a little bloated. Under the lights at night, it won't suit you. He Yan was speechless for a moment. But I'll be cold if I don't wear it. If I go out in this dress, I'll freeze to death. I can't disregard my body just to look good, right? However, Qing Mei, who was usually easy to talk to, was very persistent today. No, Mississippi. Between looking good and being cold, of course looking good is more important. Moreover, if you wear warm clothes, what will Military Governor Xiao do? What do you mean? Think about it. Qing Mei patiently guided him. Didn't the two of you go to the night market? Military Governor Xiao will definitely wear an outer garment. Miss, the colder you are, the more delicate you look and need someone to take care of you. When Military Governor Xiao sees this, his heart will ache and he will take off his outer garment for you to wear. It will definitely be beneficial for your relationship. When He Yan heard this, he said in disbelief. What kind of fallacious reasoning is this? If he gives me his outer garment, won't he also be cold? So one of us will have to freeze to death. What kind of hatred and resentment does he have? How can this be called fallacious reasoning? Qing Mei spoke with conviction. Most men in the world will take pity on weak and delicate women. Miss, if you do everything yourself, how will Military Governor Xiao realize that you need to be taken care of? You don't believe me. This is what bodyguard Qi Wu told me personally. Since he is a man and is also the Military Governor Xiao's personal attendant, he must know the Military Governor Xiao very well. Just do as he says, you won't go wrong. He Yan, was Qi Wu crazy? Why did he spend all day thinking about this instead of doing other things? Qing Mei, a good girl, had been led astray. Was Xiao Ju the kind of person who would take pity on women? Back when he was hunting in the mountains, many young women came to watch in thin clothes. There were at least 8, if not 10, girls who pounced on Xiao Ju. He also didn't see Xiao Ju giving his mink coat to anyone. That's all nonsense. Nonsense. Qing Mei pushed He Yan towards the door. In any case, miss, you can't wear this rabbit fur cloak today. Just listen to this servant this time. With a bang, the door was closed, almost hitting He Yan's nose. He Yan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the door. However, it was getting late. If He Yanxing came back from school and found out that He Yan went out with Xiao Ju in the middle of the night, there would be a lot of noise. He Yan thought about it and decided that it was fine. Her body had withstood the wind and rain of the Liang province guards. She was also very sturdy and wouldn't fall from a single gust of wind. In this way, she should be fine for the night. Thinking of this, he stepped out of the door. Coincidentally, as soon as he stepped out of the door, a carriage stopped in front of the door. Fei Nu was already very good at being the coachman. Xiao Ju stepped out of the carriage. Today he was wearing a dark blue embroidered python robe with a black fox fur cloak and a sandalwood hairpin. His ink-black hair hung down to his shoulders, making him look especially elegant and beautiful. When he looked over, the light from the lanterns made his nose bridge very straight, his thin lips distinct, and his eyes were as moving as autumn waters. Ian swallowed his saliva. In fact, with his looks, if he stood here with Xiao Ju, he was afraid that he wouldn't be the one who would be protective of the fairer sex. Qingmei was worrying too much. Chapter 226. Ian walked in front of Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju glanced at her and frowned. Why are you wearing such thin clothes? It's too hot. Ian clenched his teeth and swallowed his blood. He cursed Qi Wu in his heart, but he still pretended as if nothing had happened. He fanned himself with his hand and said, I don't know why, but I keep feeling a little hot. Xiao Ju was about to take off her cloak, but Ian quickly stopped her. There's really no need. If I feel cold, I'll go back and get another set of clothes. The reason why I'm wearing this is because it's too hot. Haven't you heard Lin Shuanghe talk about it? Sometimes people feel hot. If you wear too much, it won't dispel the stuffiness in your body. It's easy to get sick. She made up a story. Xiao Ju stared at her suspiciously. Ian grabbed her arm. All right, don't worry about what I wear. Let's go to the East Market first. I'm afraid we'll miss out on some interesting places. In Shoa capital, the markets were prosperous. They were divided into the East Market, West Market, South Market, and North Market. The most prosperous one was the East Market, which was near the city god temple. The East Market was divided into the December Market, the Lunar Market, the February Flower Market, the March Silkworm Market, the April Jean Market, the May Fan Market, the June Fragrance Market, the July Treasure Market, the August Osmanthus Market, the September Medicine Market, the October Wine Market, the November Plum Market, and the December Tofu Market. It was the end of November and the beginning of December. The plum market had already closed. There were only a few stalls selling piles of red plum blossoms. The Tofu market had already opened. Everywhere, there were stalls selling Spring Festival couplets. Everywhere they went, they would see people crowding around, cheering, clapping, and praising. It was very lively. Because it was almost the end of the year, the lantern market had also started to light up. The streets were brightly lit and filled with people. It was very festive. Ian followed Xiao Ju to the entrance of the East Market. He could already feel the bustling crowd. It's too lively. She looked up at the colorful lanterns hanging above her head, and couldn't help but exclaim. This is my first time visiting a night market. First time. Xiao Ju turned to look at her. Ian nodded. That's right. In the past, I couldn't come to places with so many people, so as to avoid exposing myself. Every year, when the He family's younger generation went to the night market together, I was especially envious. When I was in Jiang City, I felt that Jiang City's night market was really fun. I didn't expect Shoa City's night market to be so good, so beautiful. Her eyes were filled with excitement and joy. She had lived 2 lifetimes, but at this moment, she was as happy as a child. The night market was not a place that only the rich and powerful could come to. Ordinary people could come here to have fun, but this was the first time for this person. Many things that ordinary people took for granted were forbidden to her. The young man looked at the girl beside him with a gentle and tender gaze. The next moment, Ian had already pulled his sleeve and squeezed in front of a candy man. Candy man! Ian exclaimed happily. I still remember when I was young, I couldn't go to the night market. I craved it so much that I asked eldest aunt to get someone to buy one for me. I couldn't bear to eat it, so I put it in a pen holder. In the end, it melted everywhere. She turned to look at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju, do you want to eat it? I'll buy one for you. What do you want? Is this qilin pretty? Or do you prefer phoenixes? Xiao Ju glanced at the candy man on the haystack. No. Why not? Ian was very generous. I have money, I'll buy it for you. Xiao Ju's gaze shifted from the candy man to her face. Her tone was indifferent. I don't have a flower basket. Flower basket? He was confused. Do you like flower baskets? His tone was as calm as usual, but there was a subtlety in it. When we were in Jiang City, didn't you give Chu Xilan a brown sugar flower basket? How did you know? He was frightened. I just knew. The man raised his eyebrows slightly and turned to walk away. He hurriedly followed. At this moment, he also came back to his senses. Xiao Ju's tone of voice sounded a little displeased. Well, second young master Xiao might be particularly bothered by the fact that he was giving something to his enemy. At that time he gave me a tassel. He tightly clutched onto his sleeve, so as to not get separated from him in the crowd, while trying to curry favor with him to show his loyalty. I also felt that a gift would blind the eyes, so I definitely couldn't owe him a favor, so I gave him a flower basket. You know that in this world, it's the hardest thing to repay a debt. My relationship with you isn't like this. There's no need for us to draw such a clear line. Don't be angry. It's just a trivial matter. Don't take it to heart. Military Governor Xiao is magnanimous. Don't fuss over such trivial matters with me. Military Governor Xiao, second young master. Little young master? Xiao Ju seemed to be annoyed by her pestering. She turned her head away. Her expression was serious, but the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. Ian could tell that Xiao Ju wasn't as calculative as before. She turned her head and saw a stall selling plain noodles. She pulled him over. It's your birthday today. You should eat a bowl of longevity noodles. Come, I'll treat you. The stall was a couple. They set up an iron pot on the side of the street. The pot was filled with boiling water, and there was flour in a shaving pan. There were jars of salt and vinegar on the small table. A few tables and stools were set up on both sides. This was the stall. Ian let Xiao Ju sit down first. She ran in front of the lady boss and smiled. A bowl of noodles. She paused, then said, Today is this young master's birthday. She secretly pointed at Xiao Ju. I'll have to trouble the lady boss to make this bowl of noodles more beautiful. Add an egg, more vegetables, and more braised meat. Oh, it's good to have a drumstick. That's enough, Mississippi, the lady boss smiled. Any more and the bowl won't fit. Oh. Ian nodded. That's all for now. The lady boss smiled as she kneaded the noodles. The young master sitting here must be Mrs. Lover. He's really handsome. Ian's face turned red. She didn't dare to respond. The lady boss probably didn't know Xiao Ju. She was simply captivated by Xiao Ju's beauty. I've been selling noodles here for so long, but this is the first time I've seen such a handsome young master. Since you two are lovers, why don't we order a bowl of sweet dumplings with sesame fillings? The two of you can eat a bowl of sweet dumplings at the Lantern Market. You two will be lovers for the rest of your life. No need. Ian smiled. This young master doesn't like sweet things. I see. What a pity. The lady boss was still smiling. She didn't try to persuade him. Ian was about to walk toward Xiao Ju, but after taking 2 steps, he turned back and said to the lady boss, I think I'd better have a bowl. The lady boss smiled sweetly. Okay. When the noodles were served, Xiao Ju stared at the bowl in front of him. He was speechless for a moment. Ian, are you feeding a pig? The bowl wasn't big, but it was filled to the brim with noodles. There was an egg, emerald green leaves, and a few large pieces of braised meat. It was very sumptuous. Looking at it, the noodles were about to overflow from the bowl. The other bowls were all filled with clear water. Only the bowl in front of Xiao Ju was different. Eat more. Ian passed him a pair of chopsticks. Since it's your birthday, of course you can't just casually celebrate it. I specially asked the lady boss to put some noodles in for you. It's my treat. Don't be shy. Everyone's eyes fell on their table. This was the first time in Xiao Ju's life that someone looked at him as if he was a rice bucket. However, the girl in front of him held her cheeks with her hands and smiled sincerely. After holding back for a moment, he finally resigned himself to his fate and picked up the longevity noodles in front of him. Ian was very satisfied. Remember to eat it all. Xiao Ju's chopsticks trembled. He tried his best to maintain a calm expression. At this time, the lady boss's lantern dumplings were served. The dumplings were round and there were exactly 9 of them. They were served in red porcelain bowls, and were very pleasing to the eye. The lady boss didn't know if it was intentional or not, but she only gave her a spoon. Hien lowered her head and scooped one into her mouth. The sesame filling was very sweet. It was very cold when they came out. However, the night market was bustling and crowded, so the cold was dispelled. At this moment, the hot soup in front of him was warm, the dumplings were sweet, and the person sitting opposite him was quietly eating noodles. Suddenly, Hien felt that the years were peaceful. The days filled with danger, conspiracy, scheming, and saber light seemed very far away in a trance. It was as if the peaceful days in front of him could continue for a long, long time to come. She lowered her head and smiled. She picked up the spoon and obediently ate the dumplings in front of her. She ate a bowl of dumplings and a bowl of longevity noodles very slowly. Perhaps it was Hien's great hospitality, or perhaps it was because of the lady boss's excellent cooking skills. Xiaoju finally finished the bowl of noodles. When she put down her chopsticks, Hien was finishing the 8th dumpling in the bowl. When she was about to scoop up the 9th dumpling, she suddenly remembered what the lady boss said. 2 people eating a bowl of dumplings in the lantern market will be lovers for life. She had always felt that this phrase was far away. However, she didn't know when she started to look forward to it. Xiaoju saw her hesitation and asked, "What's wrong?" Hien gently pushed the red porcelain bowl to the center. He raised his head and looked into Xiaoju's eyes. He coughed softly. "Do you want to eat one too?" Xiaoju looked down at the bowl of soup with only 1 dumpling left. She didn't say anything. Hien felt inexplicably guilty. He suddenly felt like he was a demon seducing a good girl. He added, "I remember that you don't like to eat sweet things anymore, forget it." Xiaoju smiled and didn't say anything. She took the bowl, picked up the spoon that Hien used and ate the remaining dumpling. The lady boss was cleaning up the table next door. When she saw this, she smiled and said, "Okay, 2 people eating a bowl of dumplings. It's sweet and honeyed. It's a perfect match." Hien was shocked. He subconsciously looked at Xiaoju. The young man's beautiful eyes were staring at her. It was as if he had seen through her secret thoughts. Hien stood up and took out a few copper coins from his pocket. "Well, I've finished eating. Let's go." She ran away. After eating, they walked around the night market. Their bodies felt much warmer. Hien and Xiaoju walked to a corner. They noticed that there were many people in front of them. Hien casually asked a young man beside him, "Excuse me, what's going on in front?" The young man glanced at Hien and said, "They're guessing lantern riddles. Today is the last day. If you want to go, you can still make it. The more guesses you make, the more likely you are to win the most beautiful peacock lantern." Since they were here to visit the night market, they naturally wanted to join in the fun. Hien held Xiaoju's hand and squeezed into the crowd. After squeezing through the crowd, they saw a long corridor. There were all kinds of lanterns hanging from the eaves. Under the lanterns, there was a piece of paper with words written on it. It was the lantern riddles. Most of the people who came here were lovers. Some of them had already guessed a few lanterns. Hien looked and was eager to try. He asked Xiaoju, "Do you like any lantern? I'll help you win one." Xiaoju looked down at her. "You'll help me?" "Of course. Isn't it your birthday today? I'll buy you whatever you want. Winning a lantern is nothing. After all, I studied at the Xianchang dojo." Xiaoju smiled. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard someone call out to her from not far away, "Xiao Huaijin." Hien turned his head to look, and saw a pair of man and woman walking towards the 2 of them. It was actually Yan He and Xiaqingxiu. Today both husband and wife were wearing goose yellow long gowns and skirts. At first glance, they looked very compatible. Yan He was still the same. He never looked at people in the eye. When he walked, his ponytail swung high. When he walked in front of them, without waiting for Hien to speak, Yan He said to Xiaoju, "Yo, a rare guest. I really didn't expect that one day I would be able to see Xiao Huaijin shopping in the night market." Compared to Yan He's rudeness, Xiaqingxiu was much gentler. He looked at Hien and Xiaoju and smiled. "Miss He, Military Governor Xiao." Hien returned the greeting. "Miss Qingxiu." Yan He finally caught a glimpse of Hien beside Xiaoju. He sized up the 2 of them and revealed a disgusted expression. "Xiao Huaijin, don't tell me you're here to accompany this brat. This guy to the night market. He pretended to rub his arm. So disgusting. I have goosebumps all over my body. Yan was speechless. Where did this person get the right to criticize others? Didn't he accompany his wife to the night market? Xia Qingxiu pulled Yan He said, "What's wrong? I didn't say anything wrong." Sorry. Xia Qingxiu smiled at Yan. Nan Guang is like this. He's just joking. He doesn't mean any harm. Miss He, are you here to guess riddles too? Yan nodded. Yes. We happen to pass by here. General Yan, are you here to guess riddles too? I'm not guessing. Yan He said, I'm here to accompany Qingxiu. His gaze fell on Xiaoju. Xiao Huijin you. He's not guessing either. He's here to accompany me. Yan quickly cut him off. Yan He was like a cockfight whenever he met Xiaoju. He had to compete to see who was better. If Xiaoju wanted to guess and aroused Yan He's competitive spirit, he wouldn't go to the night market tonight. He would just watch the two of them compete in riddles. Yan decisively stopped him so that he could go to other places later. Sure. Yan He crossed his arms and said, then hurry up and guess. Yan and Xia Qingxiu looked at each other. Xia Qingxiu smiled and took a piece of paper from the lantern in front of them. Yan followed her movements and looked at the lantern beside him. The riddle was written very simply. Every mountain has the meaning of yearning. Yan knew all the words, but he didn't know what they meant when they were connected. Xia Qingxiu had already taken the piece of paper and read it aloud. The meaning of parting with my husband. She thought for a while and looked at the shop owner. This has been. Miss, you have good eyesight. The craftsman who made the lantern smiled and gave Xia Qingxiu a wooden sign with a red stroke. It seemed that 10 strokes could be exchanged for one of the lanterns here. Yan took a deep breath and felt that the lantern riddle he had chosen was not right. It would be better to change to a simpler one. As he thought about it, he walked to a lantern shaped like a lotus and picked up the note hanging below. Never winter and never summer. Yan was speechless. What is this? She glanced sideways at Xiaoju. Xiaoju was standing not far away and looking at her calmly. Yan didn't want to embarrass herself. She coughed lightly and walked to another spot. Lost Pavilion in Fog Moon Maze Crossing. Yan was confused. She was about to cry. Just now, she had praised herself and said that she had studied in the Virtuous Prosperity School. Now she felt that it was better if she hadn't studied at all. What are these things? She could recognize the words, but she couldn't understand why they were put together. She looked at the girls who were guessing like fish in water. Yan felt a headache coming on. She felt that even if she had encountered the most difficult battle, it would not be as difficult as this. She held the piece of paper in front of her and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a voice came from behind her. Didn't you want to give me a lantern? Xiaoju had walked over and stood behind her. Yan said yes for a while and didn't say anything else. He smiled. It seems that your poetry hasn't improved after all these years. Everyone has their own specialties. Yan braced herself. I can't multitask. He seemed to chuckle, and the hot air he exhaled fell on Yan's neck, tickling it. On the other side, Xia Qingxiu had finished guessing 10 riddles in the blink of an eye. The craftsman drew 10 ink characters on her wooden tablet and exchanged it for a jade rabbit lantern. Yan held the lantern in his arms and said proudly to Yan, why haven't you guessed it yet? Don't tell me you haven't studied before? Xiao Huijin. He held Xia Qingxiu with one hand and even provoked Xiaoju. The wife you found is not as good as my wife. Was Yan He crazy? Yan was speechless. He thought that since he couldn't beat Xiaoju in other aspects, he might as well compare with his wife, right? Who didn't have their strengths and weaknesses. How could he be so shallow? She was scolding Yan in her heart when Xiaoju suddenly whispered in her ear. Don't worry about him. Then, he stood behind her and picked up the paper riddles in front of Yan. Xiaoju was very tall. When he took the paper from behind, he had to bend over slightly. From the eyes of others, it looked like he was holding Yan in his arms. Yan could almost feel the warmth from his back touching his chest. His ears turned red and he forgot to look at the note in front of him. Xiaoju had already opened his mouth and said, both places are vast and boundless. Ah. Yan was stunned. The craftsman smiled and came over with a wooden tray. You guessed right. Xiao Huijin, you're cheating. Yan, he said angrily. How can you help her guess? What does it have to do with you? Yan couldn't take it anymore and replied. If you don't want to, you can help me guess. Who wants to help you guess? Yan, he flung his sleeves. Let's go. I get annoyed when I see them. He pulled Xia Qingxiu's hand and walked away. At this moment, Yan finally had time to focus on the riddles in front of her. She pulled the paper and read the words on it. Xiao Ju said the answer behind her. Since ancient times, too much love leads to regret. The heart is full of sorrow. Every 10 enter the top 3. Base. This person used to be the number 1 in the Xianchang house. When Yan read the riddles, he didn't even need to think and directly said the answer. Xiao Ju's appearance was outstanding. She was smart and handsome. In this kind of situation, she was especially eye-catching. Not long after, the girls with lovers and without lovers all gathered in a circle. They either stared at Xiao Ju with infatuation, or looked at Yan with envy. When the 9 riddles were almost finished, Yan picked up the note on the last lantern. 2 trees not in the forest, the field has a heart. After she finished reading, she didn't wait for Xiao Ju to speak and said, I know this, it's yearning. The craftsman laughed. Miss, you have a pure heart. Yan blushed at this praise. She only guessed 1 out of 10 riddles. She really didn't deserve this praise. The one with a pure heart was the one behind her. The craftsman finished the last stroke on her wooden tablet and said to Yan, Miss, go and pick a lantern you like. Yan turned around and pulled Xiao Ju. How about it? I said I would give you a lantern, so I will definitely give it to you. Which one do you like? There were all kinds of lanterns hanging under the eaves. It was a dazzling array. Yan pointed at a double fish-shaped lantern. This double fish lantern is quite nice. Do you like this one? Or this gourd lantern is also not bad. This lantern has a picture of a horse riding. From the beginning to the end, Xiao Ju only smiled faintly and let her be. Yan saw a green gauze lantern on the side. It had a picture of a mountain and a pavilion. As the person walked, the light changed and the waterfall seemed to flow. It was very strange. This mountain and river lantern was among the other lanterns. At first glance, it looked inconspicuous, but in fact, there was a universe inside. Yan was attracted at first glance. He thought that if he gave this lantern to Xiao Ju, it wouldn't be embarrassing. He said to the craftsman, I want this one. The craftsman was busy handing out wooden tablets to another pair of lovers. When he heard this, he said, Miss, you can take it yourself. Yan said to Xiao Ju, Wait, I will take the lantern for you. She walked to the mountain and river lantern. Just as she was about to take it down, she heard a familiar voice not far away. There is a lantern riddle up ahead. Do you want to take a look? Then a woman's voice sounded. Okay, I can buy one later and hang it in the courtyard. Yan turned his head to look and saw a man and woman walking over a few steps in front of him. The man was handsome and elegant, and the woman was beautiful and charming. It was Su Zhiheng and He Xining. Su Zhiheng was holding He Xining's hand. The maidservant behind, He Xining, was holding a large pile of trinkets in her arms. They were probably rouge, face powder, and the like that she had casually bought in the night market. On the surface, the two of them looked like a perfect couple. Su Zhiheng smiled dotingly, and when he spoke, it was like a gentle breeze and drizzling rain. Yan looked at them in a daze. She didn't know if she was mocking him or not. She originally thought that Su Zhiheng would only accompany He Wanru to the night market. Now it seemed that as long as it wasn't her, he could accompany anyone. Miss. The craftsman saw her standing there in a daze, and called out to her curiously. Yan turned his head and was shocked. He subconsciously looked at Xiao Ju. He was also standing under the lantern. His figure was handsome, and his gaze was calm to the point of indifference. Chapter 227. Yan didn't have time to speak before Xiao Ju glanced at her, turned around and walked away. Yan didn't have time to take down the lantern in front of him. He hurriedly pushed through the crowd and followed her. The craftsman behind her was stunned and called out to her. Miss, you forgot to take your lantern. But there was no response. He Xining also heard the craftsman's call, and subconsciously followed the craftsman's gaze. She saw a familiar figure hurriedly leaving. Yan was startled. This figure looked exactly like Marquis Wuan, whom she had met at Yuhua Temple. She didn't know why, but she had only met He Yan once, but he left a deep impression on her. Su Zhiheng, who was beside her, asked her, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." He Xining returned to her senses. "Let's look at the lanterns." She was a little anxious. Ever since she married Su Zhiheng, whenever he had time, Su Zhiheng would accompany her to the night market. Recently, Su Zhiheng had been busy with official business and hadn't come over for 2 months. Yesterday, when she returned to the Su family, Su Zhiheng unexpectedly asked to accompany her for a while. If it was in the past, He Xining would have been very happy. But now, walking beside Su Zhiheng, she didn't feel happy. Instead, she felt a little nervous. Her mother's illness, the assassin that night, and the military book hidden under her dead sister's bedpost. Every one of these was enough to make people suspicious. But she couldn't do anything. She had to pretend that she didn't know anything. She stared at the colorful lanterns in front of her, but her mind was filled with thoughts of the figure who had hurriedly left just now. He Yan grabbed Xiaoju's sleeve with difficulty and said, "Walk slowly. There are so many people here. If we get separated, it'll take a long time to find you. I was stepped on several times just now." He only walked forward and didn't look back, but his footsteps slowed down a little. Amidst the bustling crowd, He Yan used all the strength he could muster to grab onto Xiaoju's sleeve, almost tearing it apart. Finally, they made it out of the crowd to a place along the river. "Xiaoju." He Yan stared at her and asked, "Are you angry?" Xiaoju did not say anything. He tilted his head so He Yan couldn't see his expression clearly, so she stood on her tiptoes to get a closer look. However, Xiaoju blocked him with her arm and pushed He Yan away. "Are you really angry?" He Yan said. "I was just—" "He Yan," Xiaoju interrupted her. She looked straight at her and asked in a low voice, "Are you?" He Yan looked at him. "You still have feelings for Su Zhiheng?" Cough, cough, cough. She choked and coughed. "Don't joke around." He Yan denied. "It's not like you don't know what he did. How could I still have feelings for him?" "Oh." He raised his eyebrows and looked at her sharply. "So you're saying that you had feelings in the past?" He Yan almost couldn't breathe. She was stunned by Xiaoju's question. What kind of question was this? No matter how she answered, it seemed wrong. He Yan stammered for a while, then whispered, "I didn't have feelings in the past." Xiaoju looked at her expressionlessly. He Yan felt guilty and carefully chose her words to lie. "You know, I didn't have the power to choose in my previous life. After I switched identities with He Rufei, I naturally had to follow whatever my family said. The He family arranged for me to marry Su Zhiheng, so I married him. I didn't have feelings for him." He Yan inexplicably felt guilty, as if her husband had found out about her adultery. She also had a headache. She had just looked at Su Zhiheng under the lanterns. Who knew that it would cause so much trouble? However, if she thought about it this way, it seemed that she was the one with a guilty conscience. After all, Xiaoju had never had any other girls before her. "But I heard that when you married Su Zhiheng, you liked him very much." He looked at the river below the railings with a calm gaze. He Yan quivered. "Who said that? Who spread rumors about me behind my back? She deserves to be punished." Xiaoju looked at her indifferently. He Yan froze for a moment and lowered her head. "Okay, when I didn't know that he was this kind of person, I liked him, a little." She used her pinky and thumb to point. "Just a little. An ant is big. I can crush it with my foot." Xiaoju was so angry that she laughed. She lazily said, "Then tell me, why do you like him? Even if you don't know what kind of person he is, your taste," she sized up He Yan, "is much lower than ordinary people." Was he scolding Su Zhiheng or himself? He Yan thought to himself. Normally, he didn't think that when the young master was angry, it was really hard to coax him. Why did he ask such an embarrassing question? It was tantamount to taking a knife and dismembering someone. However, the person in front of her was staring at her. His beautiful eyes were full of scrutiny. He Yan sighed. "At that time, I just thought that this person was very good." Xiaoju smiled mockingly. "Do you remember that time when you secretly gave me a rabbit during the Eastern Mountain Hunt?" He Yan asked. "Yes. In order to make the emperor happy, the teachers in the Xianchang dojo put in all their effort to compete. They set a rule that if they didn't catch any prey, they couldn't eat and had to starve for an entire day. Now that Hien thought about it, she still felt indignant. The person who set this rule was simply sick. Even prisoners on death row were given a full meal. Just because they didn't catch any prey, they made such an inhumane punishment. Although you gave me a rabbit that day, I let it go. I didn't catch any prey. If it was summer, it would be fine. However, the feeling of starving on a snowy day was really unbearable. When the hunt was over, Hien looked at the youths around her who were returning from a rewarding journey in 2s and 3s. Her heart was extremely uncomfortable. That was when she met Su Jiheng. At that time, Su Jiheng was only a 15-16-year-old youth. He was dressed in black and looked handsome and gentle. Hien walked to the place where she put her bundle with an empty stomach. The snow on the ground was very deep. She went to the hunting ground in the morning and didn't come out until the sky was dark. She was really weak. She didn't pay attention to a piece of shirtu buried in the snow. She accidentally kicked it and fell. Half of her body fell into the snow and she didn't get up for a long time. Just as she was flopping around in the snow, she suddenly heard a voice in front of her. "Are you okay?" Hien raised his head and saw a young man in green robes. This youth looked unfamiliar. He shouldn't be a student of the Xianchang Gymnasium. However, today's hunt in the mountain was also attended by students from other gymnasiums. She guessed that he was a student from another gymnasium. Hien was still in a daze. That youth actually smiled. He directly reached out and grabbed her hand, saying, "Let me help you." He pulled her up from the snow. She was still wearing the mask on her face. The mask was cold, but the youth's hand was very warm. "My name is Su Jiheng. Brother, are you a member of the Xianchang Gymnasium?" Hien randomly nodded her head. "I heard that the rules of the Xianchang Gymnasium are very strict. If you don't catch any prey today, you'll have to starve." Su Jiheng looked at her empty hands. "It's a pity that I didn't go hunting. Otherwise, I could give you one of the prey." In the Xianchang Gymnasium, she could be considered a loner. She didn't have many friends. Because of her mask, other people also felt that she was quite unsociable. They were too lazy to approach her. This was the first time they met such a warm-hearted person. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. "Are you going over there to get your bundle?" Su Jiheng asked. "How about I help you? You can't even walk." Hien was about to say that there was no need, but as soon as she lifted her foot, she felt a severe pain in her ankle. It seemed that she had just twisted it. Thinking of this, she slightly nodded her head towards the youth and blushed. "Thank you very much." She then pointed at the red bundle. "That's mine." Su Jiheng then turned around and went to the high platform to help Hien get her bundle. After he retrieved the bundle, he handed it to Hien. He then supported her all the way to the carriage where the students of the Xianchang Gymnasium were sitting before leaving. At that time, Hien looked at Su Jiheng's back and felt that this youth was really warm and considerate. When she returned to the Xianchang Gymnasium, sure enough, she didn't have anything to eat that day. Hien hid in the room alone and poured herself some hot tea. The more she drank, the hungrier she felt. Her stomach rumbled incessantly. But what could she do? The rules of the Xianchang Gymnasium were the strictest. Moreover, she really didn't hunt anything. If she really wanted to go, she wouldn't be able to bring herself to do it. After sitting for a while, Hien helplessly sighed. She took the bundle and prepared to put away the paper and brush she had brought during the day. As soon as she opened the bundle, 2 glistening yellow loquats rolled out from inside. How could there be loquats at this time of the year? Hien stared blankly for a moment. She subconsciously picked up the loquats. The loquats were big and heavy. She could faintly smell their fragrance. This bundle had always been placed on the high platform. During the group hunt, the students only brought quivers and arrows for the sake of convenience. After thinking about it, the only person who had touched this bundle was that black-clothed youth called Su Jiheng. She peeled off the loquat and took a small bite. The fruit was sweet. When she thought about that youth's face and smile, she felt that her luck today wasn't too bad. A few years later, when Hien returned from the battlefield and exchanged identities with Hirufei, Madam He told her that she had arranged a marriage for her. The other party's name was Su Jiheng. In addition to being astonished, Hien also felt a trace of joy. The marriage of the He family's women had always been to pave the way for the men. Compared to marrying a stranger she had never met before, marrying Su Zhiheng was clearly the best choice she had. Regardless of how outsiders praised Su Zhiheng for being young and promising, in He Yan's heart, she only felt that the 10-year-old Su Zhiheng was able to take care of someone he had met by chance. He was definitely a good person. At that time, she actually had a lot of expectations for this marriage. Later on, even though Su Zhiheng favored He Wanru and He Wanru had always flaunted in front of her, He Yan still had some fantasies about Su Zhiheng because of the 2 loquats he had in his youth. Until he became blind, until Su Zhiheng personally broke this fantasy bit by bit. So, Xiaoju said playfully, "You like him because of those loquats?" "You can say that," He Yan said. "I just feel that he can take care of other people's feelings and see through other people's difficult situations. At least he's a good person." "You really like him so casually." Xiaoju sneered and walked forward. After taking 2 steps she stopped and said coldly, "Those 2 loquats were given by me." He Yan was stunned. He had already continued to walk towards the river. He Yan was stunned for a moment, then caught up with him in a few steps and grabbed his sleeve. "How is that possible? You're lying to me, right?" Xiaoju lowered his head and looked at her with a calm gaze. That year, when Lin Shuanghe had proposed to give He Yan a rabbit, he couldn't help but shoot one. He Yan, however, had set the rabbit free. Because he remembered his own experiences in the mountains when he was young, he began to treat this boy who didn't seem to have any strong points in a different light. He also knew that the students who didn't manage to hunt today would starve when they returned to the Xianchang Hall. As the winner of this group hunt, Xiaoju received a lot of rewards. The people in the palace even gave him food, and there were 2 loquats in it. At this time of the year, loquats weren't available everywhere. He originally didn't have much interest in this sweet fruit. When he was leaving, he passed by the high platform and caught a glimpse of a red bundle in the corner. He vaguely remembered that this bundle seemed to belong to He Rufei. That boy didn't manage to hunt anything today. When he returned, he would starve for the night. It was also winter, so he was afraid that it would be difficult for him to endure. He looked at the imperial food basket in his hand and thought of the first time he met He Rufei. He saw this guy standing under the loquat tree in the Xianchang Hall, jumping up and down with all his might, trying to pick loquats. It was extremely comical. After thinking about it, he stopped and took out the 2 loquats from the basket and stuffed them into the red bundle. He Yan stuttered. "It can't be? You really gave them to him?" Xiaoju quietly looked at him. He Yan thought to himself, "This is the end. This is like Xiaoju doing something good, but Su Zhiheng intercepted it. It was a freak combination of factors. How could he be happy? But at this critical juncture, how could he calm his anger? Today is your birthday, and I forgot to take the lamp just now. What do you want as a congratulatory gift?" She awkwardly changed the topic. Then, she caught a glimpse of someone selling tonghulu on the opposite side of the street. She said, "Wait here." She rushed over and bought a tonghulu. Then she ran back and handed it to Xiaoju. "Here." Xiaoju turned his head. He was probably really angry. He Yan was in a difficult position. There was no way to undo the past. She did have feelings for Su Zhiheng and married Su Zhiheng, but Xiaoju didn't. She had never experienced what Xiaoju was feeling at this moment, but she knew that it wasn't a good feeling. He Yan walked around him. "Xiaoju, Xiaoju?" Xiaoju avoided her gaze and only looked at the flowing river under the railings. She didn't know when it started snowing, but the snowflakes fell on her body. He Yan finally felt cold when she was far away from the crowd in the night market. She suddenly remembered what Qing Mei said to her before she left. He Yan glanced at Xiaoju, but he still didn't look at her. She sneezed exaggeratedly and said to herself, "It's so cold." The next moment, she felt warmth from the sky. Xiaoju turned around and took off his cloak to cover her. He was finally willing to turn around and look at her. He Yan quickly took advantage of the situation and threw herself in front of him. "You're not angry anymore?" Xiaoju helped her tie the rope in front of the cloak, but he still didn't look at her. Xiaoju's cloak was very big, almost covering He Yan's entire body. He Yan was afraid that Xiaoju would be cold, so he leaned very close to Xiaoju. Just like that night when he was drunk, he was almost sticking to him. She looked up and teased Xiaoju. Commander Xiao, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mistaken you for someone else. Today is your birthday. Don't be angry. Smile. If you don't want to smile, have a bite of candied fruit? She raised the candied fruit to Xiaoju's lips. Suddenly, her hand was grabbed. Yin was startled. She subconsciously raised her head and met his shimmering black eyes. The young man's facial features were no longer as delicate as they were when he was young. Like the moonlight on a snowy mountain, his facial features were clear and clean, and he was beautiful and flawless. He held Yin with one hand and pulled her into his embrace. He leaned over and kissed her. Chapter 228. The colorful lanterns stretched for 10 miles, and the night was bright. The river flowed under the railings, and the snow fell on them silently. The cloak blocked out all the wind and snow. The man's lips carried a faint warmth as they landed on her lips. Just like the bowl of sesame yuanxiao that she had just eaten, her lips and teeth were filled with soft sweetness. Yin could hear her own heartbeat. In the snow, it was lively and powerful, beating again and again. His clothes were still cold from the wind and snow, but his attitude was gentle, as if he was treating the only treasure in his life. It was as if he wanted to keep this moment forever. No one would not be moved by the person in front of them. When their lips parted, Yin felt a little nostalgic. She looked up at Xiaoju. Xiaoju looked down and helped her tidy up her hair that had been messed up by the wind. Yan's ears were already as red as a cooked shrimp. Yin whispered, Xiaoju, you're not angry anymore, right? Xiaoju sighed silently. Su Zhiheng, it's all in the past. Yin thought for a moment, then looked at him seriously and said, if the past made you unhappy, I apologize to you. I don't know what other girls do when they get along with the person they like. I've been a man for far longer than I have been a woman. Xiaoju, I'll be very good to you. If you like something, I'll find a way to give it to you. If you hate something, I'll help you get rid of it. If someone bullies you, I'll definitely stand up for you. I won't lie to you or hurt you. Is this okay? Actually, when she thought about it, even when she was with Su Zhiheng, she did not treat her lover like other girls. Of course, this was because Su Zhiheng was not a good person. However, she did not know how to treat the person she liked. When she was young in the He family, she did not know much about love. Because she wanted to be pitied by her biological parents, she deliberately tried to please them. Even when she went to the battlefield later, she hid this humility very well. However, the things that were engraved in her bones were like bones buried under the sand. When the wind blew, they would still be exposed. As a general, she learned how to control her subordinates and be decisive. She knew how to take care of people, but she did not know how to deal with more intimate relationships. Those vague feelings made her not know if what she was doing was right or wrong. Xiaoju's gaze was fixed on her. The girl was still holding the red candied hawthorn in her hand. She looked up at her eyes was full of sincerity and a little uncertain cautiousness. Xiaoju, 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 Xiaoju. There were so many people in the world, regardless of whether they were men or women. When it came to matters of love, they would cover it up in every way possible and test it out in every way possible. They were just unwilling to let others discover their true feelings. They always felt that if they said it out loud, they would lose. Only this person in front of him was frank and straightforward. He didn't use any tricks or tricks. He just said it bluntly and recklessly. It was as if he could beat a master to death with a flurry of punches. His heart couldn't help but waver. She was the only one he was attracted to. But how could Su Zhiheng bear to hurt such a person who offered his heart so clearly? He wasn't angry because of Yan's jealousy in the past. He was more annoyed because he was angry at himself and Su Zhiheng. Just like the doe he set free in the mountains when he was young. Its wet eyes were fixed on him, full of trust and joy. However, Su Zhiheng threw away this trust like a worn-out shoe and cut it off with a knife. The better Yan was, the more furious he felt towards Su Zhiheng. Seeing that Xiaoju did not speak, Yan thought that he was still angry. He thought for a moment and said dejectedly, maybe you have a better idea. I don't know how to play zither, chess, calligraphy, or painting. Don't ask me to learn it. I won't be able to learn it. I can help you carry sure and chop firewood. Before she could finish her sentence, Xiaoju pulled her into her arms. You are you. You don't need to do anything for me. He Yan's head was pressed against his chin. She couldn't raise her head and couldn't see his expression. But, I don't like singing and dancing prostitutes. I don't need a servant to accompany me. No one dares to bully me. I won't touch things I don't like. If I like something, I'll buy it myself. Xiaoju lowered his head and smiled. But then won't I become a decoration? I don't like you because I want more people to do things for me. His voice fell. It sounded like he was very far away, but also very close at the same time. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to do it for me. You really don't want anything from me? Yan asked. There had to be at least one thing, such as abiding by the law and respecting the old and loving the young. Otherwise, she could do anything. Could she cheat on him? Xiaoju let go of her hand and looked at the crowd in the distance. He smiled and looked down at her. It's not that I don't want anything. What is it? If I keep looking at you. He reached out and grabbed Hian's hand. The girl's hand was only half his size. When it fell into his palm, it was like a small treasure. Hian, you will keep looking at me. Hian stared at him in a daze. Lady He, don't you understand what I'm saying? He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled warmly. The lanterns reflected in his eyes. There were thousands of poses and thousands of colors, but his eyes were clearly the brightest. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Someone set off fireworks in the distance. Thousands of bright lights fell into the night sky. It was a perfect night. Hian lowered his head and hid the tears that flashed through his eyes. He held his hand and smiled as he raised his head and said, Today is your birthday. I agree to everything you said. Xiaoju, happy birthday, she said. I'll keep looking at you, she replied silently in her heart. When they returned, He Yunsheng and He Sui had already arrived home. Qing Mei had already told them the truth. She only said that today was Xiaoju's birthday, and that He Yan had accompanied Xiaoju to the night market. He Sui did not say anything, but He Yunsheng was very unhappy. In less than half an hour, he had already walked back and forth in the house several times. When He Yan and Xiaoju returned, he looked at their interlocked hands, and his expression became even worse. He Sui asked, I heard that today is Huijin's birthday. Have you eaten? Do you want to eat a bowl of longevity noodles here before you leave? We already ate, He Yan said, when we were at the night market. You're empty-handed. He Sui noticed that Xiaoju did not have anything on her. She looked at He Yan suspiciously. Yan Yan, did you not prepare a birthday gift for Huijin? This child. He Sui smiled. I've spoiled her too much. She doesn't know the ways of the world. Huijin, please don't take it to heart. I'll ask her to give you a present another day. No, Yan Yan has already given me a present, Xiaoju said. He Yan remembered the scene at the night market. His face turned slightly red and he did not respond. He Sui did not understand what she was implying. Although he did not understand, he did not ask. He Yunsheng looked between He Yan and Xiaoju vigilantly. He was deep in thought. It's getting late. You should go back first. He Yan said. If there's anything, I'll ask Shi Wu to look for you. Xiaoju nodded. She said goodbye to He Sui and He Yunsheng before leaving the He family's house. After Xiaoju left, He Yunsheng dragged He Yan into the house. As soon as he entered the house, he closed the door and asked, Hey He Yan, you didn't get taken advantage of when you went out with him, right? What advantage? He Yan knocked on his head. You're so young. Why do you have so many ideas? Where did you learn all these from? Besides, I'm standing with Xiaoju. Who's the one taking advantage of? He Yunsheng looked at her. Do you think I'm so free to care about you? He Yan saw that he seemed to be worried. She sat down and poured a cup of tea for herself. You're so worried about this? No. He Yunsheng sighed. Today, I heard from a few friends in the academy that the Yudo are about to enter the capital. He Yan stopped drinking tea. Who did you hear this from? It spread everywhere. The emperor doesn't want to go to war. The imperial court also doesn't want to go to war. I heard that the Yudo are coming to the capital to ask for peace. This war probably won't happen. He Yan looked at his expression. Do you want to go to war? Of course I don't. He Yunsheng answered without thinking. But if the Yudo were really willing to ask for peace, they wouldn't have caused so much trouble in Jiang, Rundu, and Huayuan. We have the upper hand now. What's wrong with giving way to the Yudo? He was still young and impetuous. He frowned and said, if it were me, I would seize this opportunity to beat the Yudo back to their hometown. I would make sure they never dare to step foot in Dawei again. Although children were usually immature and impulsive, they also had a bit of temper. Why are you looking at me? He Yinqing asked. Aren't you an official now? Do you know what's going on outside? It's not much different from what you know. He Yin didn't want to hide it from him. TSK. He Yinqing waved his hand. I really don't know what the officials in the imperial court are thinking. He Yan's heart was heavy. Not to mention the grudges between her and the He family and Su Zhiheng, the conflict between Xiaoju and Su Jingfu, and the dispute between the factions in the imperial court was not something that could be easily resolved. As Su Jingfu's power increased, the conflict between the fourth prince and the crown prince would also become more and more intense. The crown prince's virtue was not worthy of the position. If the crown prince inherited the throne in the future, it would be a disaster for the people of Dawei. However, if he let the fourth prince, then the future Shuo city would be in for a bloodbath once more. Tonight, the Chu manor was filled with joy. Chu Linfeng was holding a banquet at home. These days, the entire Chu family was preparing for Chu Zhao's marriage. Since she was Su Jingfu's daughter, there was naturally nothing that was not good. The marriage was handled by Madame Chu. However, Su Pingting sent her personal maid, Mo Tai, to frequently ask the Chu family about the marriage preparations. Even if Madame Chu wanted to do something, she could only give up because she was being watched. This marriage used up more than half of the Chu family's treasury. Su Pingting wanted to be the most glorious daughter in the Shuo capital in the past 10 years. She was the apple of Su Jingfu's eye, so everyone could only treat her well. Madame Chu naturally hated this marriage. Madame Chu's 3 sons were also jealous. The one who was most sincerely happy was probably Shi Jinbo and Chu Linfeng. At the banquet, Chu Linfeng patted Chu Zhao's shoulder and smiled. In a month, Miss Su will enter the gates of our Chu family. I never thought that I would become in-laws with the Su family. No wonder you are my son. Amazing. To Chu Linfeng, getting a woman's favor was something to be proud of. Little did he know that this pride was especially glaring in Madame Chu's eyes. Madame Chu still had some affection for Chu Linfeng when she first married him, but this affection had long been worn away when Chu Linfeng brought concubines into the manor one by one. She knew that she was ordinary and didn't like Chu Linfeng, so she didn't ask for anything else. She just wanted to be the mistress of the family. These years she had done well. Chu Linfeng didn't have any ability other than his appearance. If it wasn't for the old madam supporting the Shi Jinbo family, the Chu family would have been ruined by Chu Linfeng. He liked beautiful women and was protective of them. However, once they really touched his interests, he would hide behind the old madam and refuse to do anything more. He was a cold and cowardly hypocrite who thought he was loyal. The blood of the men of the Chu family was probably cold-blooded, including her own 3 sons. Only Chu Zhao. Madame Chu's gaze landed on the young man beside Chu Linfeng. Chu Zhao's appearance had inherited all the good points of Chu Linfeng and Yi Runmei. He was gentle, but also had a bit of naivety and fragility. This fragility could make people let down their guard against him, and it was easy for him to win the favor of others. Su Pingting had been arrogant and domineering since she was young, but she had never said anything harsh to Chu Zhao. However, Chu Zhao was different. He wasn't as harmless as he looked. When Chu Zhao was brought back, Madame Chu didn't want him to live until he grew up. However, she didn't do anything to him for the old madam's sake. At that time, the child in front of her had also humbly fawned over her, begging for mercy like a dog. Then he quickly found Su Jingfu to back him up, and from then on his life was saved. Madame Chu couldn't find anything that could be used against him. Unknowingly, the entire Chu family had to act according to Chu Zhao's wishes. She wasn't willing to let her everything be taken away by a secret lover, so she planned to use Xiang to sow discord between Chu Zhao and Su Pingting. However, Madame Chu didn't expect Chu Zhao to be so ruthless. Not only did he send Xiang to the crown prince without saying a word, but he also personally sent her to the crown prince's residence in a carriage. There was no barrier between him and Su Pingting. Madame Chu felt a chill in her heart. A man who could manipulate her feelings and people's hearts at will, but had a cold heart that was even worse than his father's. He stabbed her so gently, but the person who was stabbed didn't even have the heart to complain. How terrifying was that? While she was thinking, Chu Zhao seemed to have noticed her gaze. He looked over with a smile in his eyes as usual. Madame Chu's heart trembled. She lowered her head and avoided Chu Zhao's gaze. Xylan, is there anything else that I need to prepare? Chu Linfeng asked Chu Zhao with a smile. He was getting older, and he often indulged in debauchery. His handsome appearance was long gone, but his smiling face showed some fatherly care. What does he need to prepare? Eldest Master Chu couldn't help but mock. The house is almost empty for his wedding. Do we have to sell the house for him to get married? Chu Linfeng glanced at his eldest son unhappily and said in a dissatisfied tone. If you can marry the Prime Minister's daughter, I'm willing to sell the house. Eldest Master Chu didn't speak. Their 3 sons weren't as handsome as Chu Zhao, and their literary talents weren't as outstanding as Chu Zhao's. They also didn't have a Prime Minister's husband. How could they marry the Prime Minister's daughter? Chu Linfeng had been biased since he was young. Now that Chu Zhao had a meteoric rise, he was lucky. In the future, Chu Linfeng would be even more obedient to Chu Zhao. There's nothing to prepare, Chu Zhao said lightly. It's already very good. That's the Prime Minister's daughter, Miss Su. Chu Linfeng was a little drunk and lectured him. You can't neglect her. It wasn't easy for her to take a fancy to you. You have to grab hold of her. Madame Chu looked at the scene in front of her and sneered in her heart. Listen to what he was saying. She was afraid that the madam in Yihong brothel would say the same thing when she taught her daughter to grab hold of a generous guest. Chu Linfeng had relied on women all his life to become famous. Now he had to teach his son this. If word got out, he would be the laughingstock of the entire capital. I think your father is drunk. Madame Chu didn't want to see it anymore. She stood up and said, Xylan, help your father back to the room to rest. I have a headache. I'll go sit in the room for a while. Then, she didn't care about Chu Linfeng's expression and stood up to leave. What was done couldn't be undone. She couldn't do anything now, but what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Seeing this, the other 3 young masters of the Chu family also stood up. They also didn't want to see Chu Zhao and Chu Linfeng acting like a filial father and son here, so they all left. In a moment, the lively banquet turned into a mess. People left to drink cold tea. Hey, why did they all leave? Chu Linfeng slurred. Come back. No one paid attention to him. Chu Zhao helped Chu Linfeng stand up and called for the servants to clean up the mess. He then helped Chu Linfeng back to the room. Chu Linfeng had long stopped sleeping in Madame Chu's room. The 19 concubines took turns sleeping in their rooms. Today, Chu Zhao didn't help him to the concubines' rooms. Instead, he went to the study. He wasn't a gentleman who loved books. To Chu Linfeng, the study was just a decoration. There was even a soft mattress in the room. According to the servants, it was for Chu Linfeng to have sex with his maids and concubines during the day. Chu Zhao had always turned a blind eye to his father's absurd acts. The servants were left outside the door. He helped Chu Linfeng to the mattress and Chu Linfeng lay down. He seemed to be very happy today. His face was flushed red and he was already drunk. However, he still held Chu Zhao's hand and expressed his joy. Xylan, you've really made me proud. I have 4 sons. 3 of them are not good enough. I still like you the most. I brought you to meet friends and social events when you were young, because I knew that you would become my pride one day. Look, now that you're going to get married, I'm so happy. Chu Zhao sat by the mattress and looked at him silently. You're the luckiest in the younger generation of the Chu family. With the Prime Minister's help, you'll only get better and better. Not everyone can have good luck. The young man smiled sarcastically. Good luck? Was he lucky? If he didn't know who his father was when he was young and his mother was sold to a brothel and lived in fear every day, it was good luck. If he saw his mother being strangled by a servant sent by his family, it was good luck. If he lived under the same roof as his mother's murderer and didn't know if he would live to see tomorrow, it was good luck. If he couldn't even control his own life and could only be a dog under a big shot, living like a puppet, Unable to even have the woman he liked, it was good luck. He Chu Xilan was the only one with such good luck in the world. Father, he heard his own voice. Do you still remember my mother? Chu Linfeng hiccuped and said drunkenly, Your mother? Who is your mother? Then he turned over and fell asleep facing the wall. Chu Zhao looked at his face. After a while he laughed at himself and stood up to leave the study. The servant asked him if he wanted hot tea, but he shook his head and refused. He walked slowly. When he was young, he thought the Chu family was big, and that there could be dangers lurking everywhere. Now that he was older and walked around, he realized it wasn't that big. The winter in Shoa City was as cold as ever. Just like when he first came to the Chu family and saw the handsome man, he had a little bit of hope. But it was extinguished by the man's disregard and indifference. It was as cold as it was now. But now he didn't shiver like he did when he was young. It wasn't because the winter was warm, but because he was used to the cold. Anyone would get used to it. Chu Zhao walked back to his room and closed the door. In the room, an unfamiliar servant came up and said with a smile, The wedding invitations have been sent out, fourth young master. He waved his hand and replied gently, Thank you for the trouble. A happy smile appeared on the maidservant's face and she retreated. He was the only one left in the room. The Su family wanted to complete the wedding before the end of the year. It seemed rushed, but everyone knew that Chu Zhao would marry Su Pingting sooner or later. Everything about the wedding had already been arranged. Just like when he was young and became Su Jingfu's disciple. From that moment on, his fate was not destined to be his. The stove in the room emitted a red light. It seemed to have a false warmth. Suddenly, he remembered that on a spring day, someone gave him a brown sugar flower basket with his name on it for 8 copper coins. He suddenly missed that flower basket. A servant came in and interrupted his thoughts. He whispered, Fourth young master, the people Prime Minister Su is looking for in the Battle of Mingshui have not been found. They have become anxious recently. Chu Zhao's gaze moved away from the burning stove. He said calmly, Don't think too much. Those 2 people must have fallen into Xiao Huijin's hands. Missing Xiang has already sent a message. His Highness the Crown Prince dotes on her very much, and is quite dissatisfied with Prime Minister Su. People who think victory is in their hands naturally have a lot of resentment towards people who criticize them. Chu Zhao smiled. Xiao Huijin has returned to the capital. The Crown Prince and Yudo have already formed a private alliance. The Su family is coming to an end. Congratulations, fourth young master, the servant said happily. Fourth young master's wish is about to come true. After this, you will naturally have everything you want. What I want? He was stunned. After a while he said, What I want is already someone else's. Chapter 229. When he returned, it was already late at night. Xiao Ju had just returned to his courtyard when a yellow dog excitedly pounced on him and bit the corner of his robe without letting go. He squatted down and patted the dog's head. The dog wanted a yard after getting an inch. It wagged its tail fiercely at him and bit his sleeve. Its behavior was exactly the same as its owner's. The night after the night of the He family's investigation, the yellow dog called Air Mao also ran out of the dug dog hole. Since it was raised by He Yen, he naturally couldn't lose it. However, He Rufei was crazily looking for the thief that night. He Yen was afraid that he would investigate the He family and see Air Mao. So he entrusted Air Mao to Xiao Ju. No matter how bold He Rufei was, he didn't dare to go to the Xiao family's door. Naturally, he couldn't find Air Mao. Xiao Ju could only bring Air Mao back to the Xiao family. The little girl in the courtyard called Bai Guo really liked Air Mao. She gave it a bath and combed its fur so that it didn't look like a stray dog anymore. She also used a red rope to tie the fur by its ears into 2 small bunches. Although Air Mao was obviously a male dog, Xiao Ju was playing with the dog when a voice came from behind him. Huijin, when did you raise a dog in the family? Xiao Ju got up and turned around. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei were standing at the side of the courtyard and looked at him strangely. As everyone knew, the second son of the Xiao family was very particular about cleanliness. Normally, it was fine when he was in the military camp, but when he returned to the capital, he was even more picky. Xiao family didn't raise any birds. Other than the green-eared horse, there were no other animals in the family. This dog looked like an ordinary dog from a farmer's family. Its fur was yellow with a little bit of black. It shouldn't be anything valuable. Xiaoju looked down at Air Mao. Air Mao was barking noiselessly at him. I helped someone raise it. Who would ask you to help raise a dog? Xiaojing laughed. That's too much. Bai Rongwei nudged Xiaojing with her elbow and smiled. In Shua City, only Miss He can get Huijin to help take care of a dog. Xiaojing came to a sudden realization and looked at Xiaoju with a gratified gaze. This younger brother of hers had always been overly cold and unreasonable towards women, but now it seemed that he was quite good at pleasing women. During the day, Bai Rongwei had already prepared a birthday banquet for Xiaoju. She also knew that he was going to accompany He Yan to the night market tonight. There were many delicacies in the night market, so there was no food left for Xiaoju tonight. Big brother and sister-in-law, why are you still waiting for me so late? Xiaoju asked. What's the matter? Xiaojing approached him and looked at Air Mao, who was playing in the snow in the courtyard. She smiled and said, Do you know that 4th young Master Chu from Count Shijin's residence is going to marry Miss Su next month? Xiaoju absent-mindedly nodded. You and 4th young Master Chu were both granted a marriage by His Majesty. Xiaojing said. Now that 4th young Master Chu's wedding date has been set, your sister-in-law and I would like to ask, when do you plan to set the date for your marriage? Xiaoju was slightly startled. Your big brother and I have already talked to Master He. Master He said that as long as Miss He likes it, he doesn't mind. Miss He is a girl after all, so I can't ask too much. Bai Rongwei looked at Xiaoju. You are usually with Miss He. Have you ever mentioned this to her? Xiao family was very open-minded. When Xiao Zhongwu and Madame Xiao were still alive, Xiaojing wanted to marry Bai Rongwei, who was a concubine's daughter. Madame Xiao didn't agree, but in the end, she went along with Xiaojing's wishes. Now that Xiao Zhongwu and his wife were no longer alive, Xiaojing and Bai Rongwei wouldn't interfere with Xiaoju's marriage decision. It was all up to Xiaoju. I plan to get married after the new year, Xiaoju said. Bai Rongwei and Xiaojing looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. They thought that it would take another year or so, but they didn't expect Xiaoju to decide so quickly. This was good. It seemed that Xiaoju liked Miss He more than they thought. Since it's like this, I'll give your birth characters to Master tomorrow, and let him choose a good day for you. We also need to discuss with Master He what to do next. Don't worry about the betrothal gift. Ruby and I have already prepared it for you. Bai Rongwei's smile was full of genuine happiness. She took Xiaojing's hand and said, Ruby and I will go and ask someone to send the invitation to Master. Huijin, you've been tired today. Go back to your room and rest. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Xiaoju nodded, and Bai Rongwei left with Xiaojing satisfied. Xiaoju stared at their backs until Air Mao came over to tug at his boots again. Only then did he regain his senses. In the past, he only felt that the yard was empty and cold. Now, with the addition of a small dog, a mute dog that didn't know how to bark, it suddenly became lively. He lowered his head and smiled. He didn't go back to his room, but turned and walked towards the ancestral hall. In the Xiao family's ancestral hall, Xiao Zhongwu and his wife's memorial tablets were placed at the front. Xiaoju walked to the side and took out an incense stick from the shrine and lit it. Niao niao, smoke rose into the air. Xiaoju's face was hidden behind the smoke, and his expression was diluted. As long as he returned to Shuajing, he would often come to the ancestral hall. When there was thunder, when there was worship, when he was bored. He wasn't a person who liked to talk. In life, there were too few people he could talk to. Everyone had their own difficulties, so there was no need to share them with others. The most difficult time was when he was scolded by the scholars behind his back during the Battle of Gua City. When he returned to his residence, he only went to the ancestral hall to light 3 incense sticks. After the 3 incense sticks were lit, everything returned to normal. There were many things in the world that needed many years to experience bit by bit. When he was young, he had seen everything and found everything boring. In fact, he yearned for the sights of the world, but the sights of the world avoided him. So what if he was young and successful? So what if he was the son of an aristocratic family? Everyone thought of him as the moon high up in the sky. In fact, the moon was just a lonely youth. He had friends, and then his friends betrayed him. He also looked forward to his family, and then his family left him. His most unrestrained youth was just a few short years, and the only candy left in his life was given to the people who sought death on the road. All these years, he had been alone and left nothing behind. Until one day, a smiling girl barged into his life and told him, "I like the moon, but the moon doesn't know." He had never been so sure of one thing before. Xiao Ju raised his eyes and looked at the memorial tablet behind the smoke. "Father, mother." His voice was calm, as if he was saying an unshakable oath. "I like someone. I want to take her as my wife." In one of the courtyards of the He residence, the sound of intense coughing could be heard. The servant girl who was sleeping in the outer room of the courtyard was turned over by the noise and said in a daze, "Second madam is coughing again. Quickly go and take a look." "I'm not going." Another servant girl turned over and said impatiently, "Even second master doesn't care. Why should we be meddlesome? It'll be better in the daytime. If you want to go, you go." "It's so cold, I'm not going." The servant girl covered her head with the quilt. "I'll pretend that I didn't hear it." The coughing continued outside, and after a while, as if it was deliberately suppressed, a few muffled groans could be heard. "Second madam," he struggled to get up, and her throat and eyes were in pain as if it was burned by fire. The handkerchief in her hand was already covered in blood. She struggled to breathe, and after a long while, she fumbled for the lamp. He Yuanliang hadn't come to her courtyard for a long time. To be precise, it was after the incident at Yuhua Temple, when she was grounded in the He residence, and He Yuanliang refused to come to see her again. In fact, second madam, he had already expected this. Her husband was a villain, a cowardly and greedy villain. Now he was even more afraid of offending He Rufei, so he hurriedly drew a clear line with her. Even if she was his first wife. First wife, second madam, he smiled sarcastically. So what if she was his first wife? He could be so cruel to his biological daughter. So his first wife, who was not related by blood, was no different from a stranger to him. Second madam, he looked at the flickering flame in the oil lamp. She was the eldest daughter of the first wife in the family. That year, her father decided to marry He Yuanliang, because he saw that the He family still had a place among the nobles in the Shuo capital. In her original family, the marriage of a daughter was to pave the way for the career of her father and brother. She didn't expect that it would be the same when she married into the He family. Unfortunately, she was unlucky and gave birth to 2 daughters, so of course, her children became the sacrifices of the He family. Second madam, he hated He Rufei for being cruel and merciless, hated He Yuansheng and his wife for coming up with the idea of exchanging children, hated He Yuanliang for being a coward and incompetent, and most of the time, she hated herself. She hated herself for not being able to change everything. If she could give birth to a son, perhaps with a son, He Yuansheng would not be so arrogant. But she didn't, so she couldn't protect He Yan and He Xining. There was a knock on the door. Second madam, he said. "Come in." It was a little girl who came in. She didn't look familiar. "Second madam," he asked. "Who are you?" "This servant is called Cui Luo, the maid who sweeps the yard." Cui Luo replied respectfully, holding a pot of hot water in her hand. This servant went outside to get some hot water. "Second madam, drink some water to avoid coughing." She went to the table, picked up a teacup, poured a cup of water, and handed it to second madam He. The water was just right, it was not hot. Second madam He took a sip, and the tingling in her throat suddenly felt better. She said, "Thank you." Cui Luo lowered her head and said softly, "This is what this servant should do. If second madam needs this servant's help, please let me know. In my yard, everyone has already treated me as if I don't exist." Second madam, he smiled bitterly. "Why bother you? This servant's master is second madam He, so I naturally have to listen to second madam's orders." Cui Luo's voice did not change. Second madam He was slightly stunned, and couldn't help but seriously look at the servant in front of her. The maidservants of the He family were strictly disciplined by He Yuansheng and his wife. In the past they were quite lively, but now, because of their fear of He Rufei, they had become dull. The servants were always trembling with fear, but this servant girl stood there, neither servile nor overbearing. She looked at second madam He without any respect, as if she was an ordinary person. Second Madam He's heart moved, and she asked tentatively, "Can you really help me with anything?" "Second Madam, please tell me. Can you find a doctor for me?" Chui Luo was silent for a moment, then said, "I'm afraid I can't right now, but this servant can bring some pills back for Second Madam." Second Madam He suddenly understood something. She sat forward a little and lowered her voice. "You're not someone from the He residence. Who is your master?" Chui Luo looked at Second Madam He with some surprise. Lord Fei Nu said that he wanted her to sneak into the He family to secretly take care of Second Madam He. And she really did that. These days, Second Madam He didn't have any status in the He family, and the servant girls didn't put her in their eyes. He Yuanliang never took the initiative to come to see her when she was seriously ill, and he also didn't call a doctor for her. Just like tonight, if Chui Luo didn't come into the room, Second Madam He could only cough until dawn. Chui Luo always thought that Second Madam He was a somewhat weak and incompetent ordinary woman. Now that she heard her words, she knew that Second Madam He was smart and insightful. Chui Luo didn't speak. "Is your master General Feng Yin?" Second Madam He asked in a low voice. Chui Luo was even more surprised. Madame Hier laughed. She laughed for a while and her expression became serious again. She said, "I know what your master wants to do. Go back and tell him that I can help him. However, as the price of the deal, he must protect my daughter He Xining." Chui Luo was silent for a while, and didn't say anything. She only put the hot water bottle on the table and said softly, "If Madam has any orders, call this servant." Then she closed the door and left. Second Madam He looked at the hot tea on the table, and no one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she swallowed the sweet taste in her throat and lay down again. The night passed, and early the next morning, Fei Nu brought back the news of the He family. In the study, Xiaoju frowned. "A deal?" "Second Madam He said so," Fei Nu replied. When Chui Luo came back with the news, Fei Nu was also surprised. He didn't know whether to admire this woman's courage or say something else. He Rufei and Second Young Miss He exchanged identities. Second Young Miss He is the real General Fei Hong, and Second Young Miss He should be aware of this. Fei Nu said. He Rufei might be using He Xining to threaten Second Madam He, which is why Second Madam He doesn't dare to tell the truth. With Second Madam He's help, the secret of the He family should be easy to uncover. Speaking of this, Fei Nu sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that General Fei Hong, who made the Chang people tremble in fear on the battlefield, was actually a woman? And Second Madam He and Second Master He were so cold-hearted that they would let a girl bear such a heavy fate, and get rid of her after she became famous. They, the Nine Flags Battalion, had seen all kinds of cruelty on the battlefield, but when they knew the truth, they couldn't help but feel pity for General Fei Hong. Even if a famous general of a generation died, he should die with a bang on the battlefield, instead of being killed in an ordinary backyard by someone with a sinister trick. Second Madam, he only mentioned He Xining? Xiaoju asked. Fei Nu nodded. Yes. Xiaoju lowered her eyes. I understand. Young master then. Let Chui Luo tell Second Madam He. Xiaoju looked out the window. I will make this deal. On the first day of the 12th month, Wu Tuo's envoy, Menimbu, entered the capital. Emperor Wen Xian summoned the Wu Tuo envoy to the throne room. In Qinglan Palace, Concubine Lan was leaning on a soft couch, watching a palace-made brew tea. Concubine Lan was not young anymore. There were new beauties entering the harem every year, but she was the only one who was favored by His Majesty. Everyone said that Concubine Lan had such good luck. Not only was she favored by the emperor, but she also gave birth to a virtuous and talented son. However, her temperament was not competitive. Not to mention that she was suppressed by the empress. Even Noble Lady and I dared to be arrogant in front of her. However, ever since Emperor Wen Xian gave 5th Prince Guangji to Concubine Lan to raise, Noble Lady and I had restrained herself a lot. 5th Prince Guangji was young. Although Noble Lady and I repeatedly warned him that Concubine Lan was not a good person, Guangji felt that Concubine Lan was much gentler than his biological mother. He had never argued with Concubine Lan. It was the same today. Guangji ran in from outside, and the old mama behind him hurriedly said, 5th Prince, run slowly. Be careful not to fall. Mother, Guangji ran to concubine Lan's side and said with a smile. Today, the Yudo emissaries entered the palace. Imperial father summoned them in the hall. I heard that the Yudo sent many gifts, such as ivory as half a person's height and white peacocks. Mother, this son wants to see them. Concubine Lan smiled and patted the snow off his clothes. If you want to go, then go. Won't mother come with me? Guangji asked. I won't be going, noble consort Lan said with a smile. Just let Chang Mama take you there. The fifth prince was young, and only wanted to see the white peacocks. When he heard this, he said, Okay, this son will go now. After seeing them, this son will tell mother about them. Chang Mama took the fifth prince's hand and left. Concubine Lan smiled and shook her head. He's still like a child. Fifth younger brother is young. A voice sounded from outside the door. It's normal for him to be a little childish. The palace maid behind her hurriedly said. This servant greets the fourth prince. The fourth prince Guangshua stepped in. Noble consort Lan was beautiful and delicate, while the fourth prince took after his mother. He was bright and handsome. Compared to Crown Prince Guangyan, who was always indulging in sensual pleasures, he seemed much more amiable and reliable. Concubine Lan saw the Guangshua and immediately smiled. She pulled him to sit in front of the stove and had a palace maid pour hot tea for the Guangshua. She said, What brings you here today? Imperial father is meeting the Yudo emissaries in the hall. The crown prince is also there, so this son came to see mother. The Guangshua smiled. Concubine Lan smiled but didn't say anything. Mother also knows about the Yudo emissaries, right? Concubine Lan's expression was no longer as relaxed as when she had faced Guangji. She sighed. I know. Imperial father is willing to meet the emissaries, which means that he is willing to accept the Yudo's request for peace. The Guangshua's smile also faded. That's fine. After the Battle of Jiang and the Rundu, the Yudo won't dare to act rashly. But if Imperial father agrees to let them open a market in Dawei, the consequences will be unimaginable. Concubine Lan looked outside. Everyone else leave. Yugui closed the door. The palace maids all left, and Yugui closed the door. Concubine Lan looked at the Guangshua. Have you ever said these words in front of your imperial father? The Guangshua shook his head. No. Imperial father never talks about these things with me. Emperor Wenshuan liked the fourth prince because the fourth prince was like Concubine Lan. Concubine Lan's literary talent was outstanding, her temperament was gentle, and she didn't fight for anything. In the depths of the palace, she was like the last piece of pure land in the emperor's heart that could not be sullied. Even though Empress Zhang didn't like Concubine Lan, Concubine Lan still lived well in the depths of the palace for so many years. Because she didn't make mistakes, the emperor also protected her. This pity and respect for Concubine Lan also extended to the Guangshua. Guangshua was the same. No matter how much the courtiers encouraged him to compete with the crown prince for the position, the Guangshua remained unmoved. When he was with Emperor Wenshuan, most of the time, they talked about poetic and picturesque matters. Politics and the country should be the crown prince's concern. If he overstepped his boundaries, the emperor would dislike him. Guangshua. Concubine Lan looked at him and suddenly said, Do you want to compete? Guangshua paused. Do you want to compete for the position? Concubine Lan repeated. As if the secret in his heart had been exposed, Guangshua awkwardly avoided Concubine Lan's gaze. A Ken doesn't dare. I only asked if you want to, not if you dare. In the eyes of the usually gentle woman, there was a never-before-seen determination and unfamiliar coldness. Guangshua was stared at by those eyes and couldn't help but say, I do. After a while, he composed himself and said, I do. Mother, the crown prince doesn't deserve to be the crown prince. He only knows how to eat, drink, and play. Yudo and him must have private dealings. If there were other virtuous and talented brothers in the palace, I would also support him. But right now there is no one else. If one day Guangyan sits in that position, no one knows what Dawei will be like in the future. Perhaps Dawei won't even exist. When he finished speaking, there was an extreme silence in the palace, as if shocked by his rebellious words. Concubine Lan sighed softly. All these years, this consort has never thought of anything else. It wasn't my wish to enter the palace. Since I've already entered, I will live well. This consort doesn't care what happens to Yudo, or what happens to His Majesty. This consort doesn't even care what happens to Dowei in the future. She looked at Guangshuo and reached out to touch Guangshuo's face. A gentle smile appeared in her eyes. In this palace, Guangshuo, this consort only cares about you. If the Guangyan becomes the emperor, you and I, mother and son, will have no way to survive. Her voice was soft as she said the cruelest words. This consort has lived for most of her life. It doesn't matter whether I die or not. But you can't. Guangshuo. She smiled. You are so intelligent, gentle, and so young. How can you die at the hands of this kind of person? This consort definitely won't allow it. Guangshuo looked at the woman who had straightened up from the couch. Her eyes were still as elegant and dignified as before. With just one movement, her aura had completely changed. A wave of emotions suddenly surged in his heart. It was as if the impulse that had been accumulating for a long time was about to burst out. Mother, this consort already has His Majesty's favor. You also have the love of the courtiers and the people. But just these two things aren't enough. He Rufei has already been bribed to fight for this position. You must obtain Xiao Huaijin, she said.